Okay, so at this time, I would like to begin our meeting of the January 26th at 7:04. If we could please rise for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We don't have any changes for our agenda. So at this time, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes for January 5th and January 12th.
Christina Ford, so moved.
Any discussion on here? Are there any corrections or anything that you would like to make?
My name was misspelled again.
What was misspelled again?
Yeah, that, it just pointing it out.
Okay, so we
Not a
will.
big deal,
It's
but
PH.
yes,
PH.
please.
Oh, were you looking at the minutes though, where the
Yeah.
minutes were attached and the minutes were wrong on
Yeah.
that? That's, yes, so
Okay.
those minutes reflect that we asked to change the PH.
Oh, okay, I apologize.
So I
Okay,
think we're all,
okay,
we're good.
thank you.
Okay. Anyone else at this time? We can do, well, we have a Tony over here, so we will go by individuals and do a vote. So Jaden, approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Tony?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well, therefore the minutes pass as is, and just to make sure though that Sophia's name is PH, but I think it is. Okay, at this time, we will allow public participation. We do not have any members in our audience, therefore it would be online, so if you would like to, please raise your hand. Dr. Willick can put up a 2-minute timer, and we can go from there. And once I do call on you, please list your name and address for the record. Oh, we only have 10%. We're only here too, so. Okay. I don't see any hands being raised, therefore we will close out the public participation and move on to correspondence. Jacob?
All right. We had 5 emails in between the last board meeting and now. We had an email discussing a tragic overdose at a Connecticut school. The author requests that the board make a statement and raise awareness over school resources that may help students suffering from mental health and substance use issues. We had an email asking if the recording was available at the special BOE meeting held on January 19th. An email asking for a follow-up with regards to an FOIA request. An email opposing a proposal to combine the Black Latino history class with Native American studies. An email asking why the author is not allowed to watch his child in class. The author asks for the policy committee to look into the matter. That's it.
Thank you, Jacob. We will move on to points of information at this time. Would any member of the board like to say anything?
I was just curious for that last one. Is the policy committee going to look into that? I don't know if anyone had reached out about that.
I'm actually,
Or
I
not.
thought about that
Yeah.
too when I read it, because that's just been the protocol due to safety. So I don't know if that would necessarily fall under the policy changes, since it is under the safety plan.
Yeah, it's not really so much policies, it's safety and security, all hazard plan stuff, you know. And there's some details about that situation that I'll talk with the parent guardian
Okay.
about. But yeah, that's where that lies, it's pretty much in that structure.
Because I mean, as long as I know that you can't, not every parent can just walk your kid
Okay.
down, and even as a volunteer, it's not. You have to go through the whole background screening and have your license or social, I don't even remember what you go through, but you do have all those protocols in place, so.
Okay. Just curious.
Yeah, no, not a problem. Anyone else?
I have one more question on that. Are there also like more restrictions simply because of COVID? Because I know like we don't have a lot of parents volunteering in the classrooms and all that kind of fun stuff. So I would assume that that would be in conjunction with that, having people in the class, in the schools, even walking the child to class due to COVID, having less folks
Yeah,
in
I
there, or
mean,
is it just strictly a
We
safety?
don't have volunteers right now, so
Right,
that's
right.
true with respect to COVID. You know, so yes, COVID does also restrict, you know, who and how many people we have.
Right.
But safety, security is the number one about people, you know, just that would be the main situation. Yeah.
I just wanted to confirm how we're doing it as well. Thank you, Ashley.
No problem. Anyone else?
Thank you, Dr. Love.
Of course.
Dr. Will, do you have anything you'd like to add in this time?
Yeah, I just wanted to, take a moment to, again, our hearts go out to, the community, the school where the young man lost his life. We have, we always have to be vigilant in school systems and communities to make sure that we're paying very close attention to the needs of the children in the community at large. And I do feel Tolland does a very good job of that. The mental health task force is in place. The school system has a number of resources, and people have asked about Narcan. All of our schools have Narcan. So, we're prepared to respond to the needs of the families and the communities. We just wish the best to that family and the community.
And you did create a sheet of what we have for resources,
Yeah,
correct?
so the on the dashboard, which I can also share in any other way that that board would like. I did show it at the mental health task force meeting the other night too. I think when I was able to put it up there, all the resources that this community does have as part of the Eastern Highland Health District, not only what the school district has, but also what the community at large has for a number of different resources, from mental health to substance support, things like that.
Thank you for putting that together. That was very useful. I'm sure that you guys can use that as well. And if board members think that we should post that somewhere else, feel free to voice your concerns. Okay, so at this point, let's move on to our student representatives. I am Lee Nally.
So this past week, we hosted a new Cocoa and Cram event, which helped kids prepare for finals. So we had upperclassmen from NHS and student council stay after in the library. I think it was Monday and Tuesday, and we helped them just prepare for finals and studies. They're better off for those.
Yeah, and finals went from being worth 20% to 10%, which has reduced the stress level of a lot of kids, both students.
You guys feel prepared?
Yeah.
Any questions for our ladies?
Good luck on exams.
Thank
you.
Good luck.
Absolutely. And with that said, you feel free to leave and go study. Please go study. Thank you so much.
Have a good night, ladies.
Okay, and let's go ahead and jump into the superintendent's report for the school calendar first.
Okay, so, this is displayed up online for everyone. It's also posted in the hybrid meeting folder. The school calendar comes around, each year we do put forward for the next year around this time, the school calendar for the coming year. So in this case, it is for the 2020-2023 year. This calendar has a number of different things that it's responsive to. I'm just trying to get. Okay, and so you can see that the parent-teacher conferences are available there, K through 12. There's a full day, November 23rd, to help provide families with needed travel time. That's something that has been asked for many years, so we consistently include it in our calendar. There is a half day on December 23rd, which is responsive to family needs and requests that they've made over time. It does adhere to the EastCon regional calendar, which is the expectation. We're expected to align our calendars with our region, and we belong to the RESC called EastCon, the Regional Education Center of EastCon. So sometimes people say, how come your break is not the same as a town that is directly next to us, like Ellington or something? And that's because they are in a different region than we are, so they adhere to a different regional calendar. This provides enough days to mitigate the potential impact of cancellations. You might notice that it's starting earlier for teachers, starts earlier in the year, so it ends earlier in the year. This year, we started a little later because Birch Grove School, we needed time to have that completed. Normally, we would start a little bit earlier, and that's reflected in this calendar so that we get out earlier at the end. Faculty and services for February are aligned with the days off with federal and state holidays. So that gives families a little bit more time I will talk about some requests that were made as we were going through this, and we talked about it in policy. Of course, Mr. Holt, if he wants to weigh in, or Ms. Shake. There were some conversations about some feedback received. One of the items of feedback was, would the board consider extending February and having an entire week of February break, which would add 2 days to the end of the year of this calendar. That was one request. Another request was potentially starting later, which would push the year at the end out a bit. But the request that was talked a little bit about, as a possibility would be, creating that whole week in February. Now, this particular calendar presented as is does not include an entire week in February. It has an in-service day like this year, provides with the weekend 5 days for a family to do something. A Thursday and Friday, they're returning. So the one that you're seeing presented here does not include a full week in February, but I'm throwing in the note that that was something that people, wanted the board to consider. Also, reasonable number of early release days, as roughly the same as this year. This year, they were very well utilized. Talked about that in policy. We used them to offset the need for substitutes, and it's a way of executing a number of the duties that we need to do professionally for teachers and students that otherwise we just would not have the time to do, or we would have to accomplish beyond the contractual day, which would cost money, or substitutes, which would cost money. So it's a highly effective way of achieving what's needed to be achieved for students. I can go into that a little more in a few minutes. It's also structured so that the early release days retain students. In the past, we've experimented with Fridays for those. They did not go particularly well, because if you have a Friday that's an early release day, the motive, it's just too much of a motivation, and people do tend to either not show up that day, or people will go for long weekends. And I'm not speaking of teachers, I'm speaking or staff, I'm speaking of families sometimes will go, oh, that looks like it's a great weekend to go to grandma's or something. So we ended up losing enrollment, a bit during those days. And so that was looked at as, putting them to the Wednesday mitigated that a bit. So this is presented to the board for a first read, for its consideration, and it was presented to policy earlier as per protocol. And thank you to Mr. Holt for entertaining that today on the agenda, so that we could roll with it in the meeting tonight. So that's about it. Let me just look at a few more notes. So I did mention, so the February week was one of the asks. And what that would do is, if you would add 2 days to the end of this calendar. So if you look at it, currently it's ending June 8th, extending through the February break, would have the last day be on the 12th. If you push the year out a week, that would extend it a total of 8 days, which would, push the final day out to June 20th. So if you start later and you add the days for February, that pushes out to the 20th. If you wanted to add days for a February break, that pushes out to June 12th, and that's without snow days. So those are the asks that rose to the surface recently of the board with respect to the calendar.
Can I ask you, why do we have 2 professional developments in October?
It's just the way that aligned. Usually during that time of year, it's when we're starting to get back some of the data from the NWEA, assessments and things like that, and they need time to analyze and break into those data groups. One thing I'll do here real quick, if I can get this to cooperate here, is, let's see if I can get the CV matrix up. I want to just give you a sense of, kind of what, and this is my own rough notes. Again, this is not refined, so forgive any misspellings or issues or things like that. And it is small. So if you take a look, your early release date can be used for all of these kinds of things. So see if I can get that so you can see it. Data teams, which is when we take all the results from the various common assessments, the NWA assessments and other things, intervention resources and others. The teams get together in subject specific areas to focus on kids' needs. and they, come up with plans to help, help kids move along, pacing correctly at grade level and supporting kids who are in situations that, cause them to struggle. We also use it for PMT, that's physical management training. We're required by the state of Connecticut to do PMT training. And that kind of thing is when, someone is having an unfortunate episode, we are trained in how to manage the situation. The bridges training, the kind of thing we would use it for, literacy house, structured literacy, ELA training, all kinds of different ELA trainings, but in particular, ReadCon is one of the ways that our staff keeps up on the most recent, most important training in how to teach kids reading. So ER's days are perfect times to align with that. A lot of times ReadCon will offer things and it'll offer them during the day or in the afternoon. And our teachers can avail themselves of that during the ER days. We do co-teaching training, also what's called dyad training, bridges training, and those data teams. So it just gives you an idea of, Houghton Mifflin training. This is all stuff we would have to do either somehow outside of contractual day or using subs to accomplish if we didn't have the ER days. So the ER days have become and are a really important strategy in making sure we are providing services for children. Another example here would be Defined Learning. That's a resource offered by the state of Connecticut, a very robust resource. If we didn't have the ER days to be able to train them, we would have to try to entice people to do it after hours or at a different time, or we have to take subs and get them out of class, things like that. So this allows us to do that, and then they can avail themselves of this resource that's free from the state of Connecticut and is actually project-based learning, and it's a really great product that the state has purchased for all the schools in Connecticut. But if we can't avail themselves of it, it's like a tree in the forest. It might as well not even exist if people aren't, going to get the time to learn about it, train it, use it. So it's got some really awesome project-based components to it. So I just wanted to kind of give an example of, how these are used. And, in my notes, Amy Lawrence coming for the most recent one for InService as just a, point of information. We also do training, PPT, IEP, 504 trainings, things like that. Sometimes we need to train staff with various technologies. So, this was just to provide it as an example, of the kinds of things that we do. It's a really important strategy, a really important strategy for us, and effective use of the time. So.
Well, let's just open it up to board members with questions and concerns, and then we'll go from there. Perfect.
Okay, I'll start.
You're the first one I saw.
Okay, so I have a bunch of concerns, so I'll just go kind of through the calendar. So I would actually like to see the week pushed back to August 31st. Mainly because we are getting out so late this year, and I think that our staff and our students could use a little bit of a break, especially our staff. I think this is probably going to be even more difficult year than last year, and I think it might be nice for them to have those 9 weeks off versus 8 weeks off. And just to note, we have not started a week and a half before Labor Day since 2009. So I think it's kind of become the expectation that we normally start the Wednesday before Labor Day, which we did from 2011 to 2019. The couple of after Labor Days were thrown in there, and that was mostly due to buildings. I think it was Birch Grove, and then I think actually I'm even going back to 2006 was because of the high school. So just kind of throwing that out there that I think Tolland families anticipate that we're going to start the Wednesday before. And I think that we might want to at least try to keep it consistent because Birch Grove has thrown us off the last couple of years. Moving on, just kind of what you were saying, Ashley, I do have some concerns about the second half day in October. I think on the 21-22 calendar, so the current one, we added 2 or 3, I can't remember, half days because of COVID. So we have 11 in the current calendar, and I kind of would like to see us go back a little bit to the way it used to be. I think it's difficult for families, especially working families, to have more than 1 half day a month. I feel like we've kind of always had one half day a month, and I think that's a little bit more reasonable. So I'd like to see at least that October perhaps looked at removing that one. And as far as parent conferences, so I have a little bit of an issue with the full day off again. I know that we've always done it this way, but I'd really like us to consider doing 3 half days for parent conferences in November rather than a full day off. I've not quite understood why the high school has also moved to that full day off. That's something that is relatively new, that the high school now gets that day off. So this is just something, I think I said this exact same thing last year and the year before. I'm not sure why we've changed that. And then that kind of brings me up to tomorrow's day off. I just am not sure why we need another day off in January for PD. I get the mid-semester break day because that's been around for quite some time. But I don't know, do people even realize that tomorrow is a day off for K through 8?
I did not.
I have this as my note
So-
because we talked about that. I said, you know, we really need to make sure that people
Yeah,
understand.
I
it is a
don't think
day off.
most people even know that, and I think I'd like to see that go back to the way it used to be as well. Again, I sound like a broken record. I think I've said that the last 2 years as well when we discussed this calendar. And then lastly, I would not be in favor of extending February break. I think that's also something that's been like that for well over 10 years. I think people are used to the 5-day weekend. Actually, I don't even think we've always gotten a 5-day weekend. So I think the 5-day weekend is actually quite nice. And, you know, if we get out of school by that mid-June, I think that's what most people have kind of come to expect. And I think that that's reasonable. And I know that we've, you know, adjusted accordingly for snow days in the past. So anyway, sorry, those are just all my notes on all this. So that's all I have.
Yeah, I mostly agree with what Ms. Griffin said. I think the 25th to go back seems pretty early. I think people kind of like consistency with their calendars when it comes to planning their schedules, and I think having it closer to September would be beneficial. The February break, I think last time we had a February break was in 2010 or something. We got a full week. It was a long time ago.
You were definitely still in school.
Yeah, yeah. So it was like in intermediate school, so it's a long time ago. And you know, I just think it's a little weird because you got Christmas break a couple months before, then you have April break a couple months after. I think it just seems a little bit redundant. And then the final thing was the half days. I agree that it'd be kind of nice to get closer to the pre-COVID era with the number of half days that we had. I know we added a couple in last year. We've amended the calendar. If we could go back closer to the 2019 era, I think that'd be beneficial. Just also, although I understand, you know, professional development, they have their role in their place. I know they have their personal experience. When it's a half day, you know, that whole day is kind of off for students. You're not dealing with like a normal lesson plan. I think there's more that's being missed than just the amount of hours that's spent in school. I think it kind of is a hiccup in the system and kind of with the way things run on half days. So if we could be a little bit more conservative with how many we have, I'd appreciate that. Although I do absolutely get what you're saying, Dr. Miller.
I mean, my other question is for the half days, because I mean, I definitely like to see one less in October. But I do understand the fact of having half days, because I know for staffing purposes that we do not have staff. We don't have subs. We don't have, I mean, I know Mr. Tolland was teaching classes at the high school. So I thank them for their efforts, what they do. So I think, you know, it is something that we need to balance at the same time. You know,
I think there's 10 and 10. June 8th always, well, the last day always looks like it's a day, you know, but it's like a half day. That's the end of the school year.
well, just the pink. pink
But
half
I'm
days on
speaking of
Wednesdays.
the, you know, the ER days, sorry.
The year days, yeah.
And then the in-service day has been there for a while because it's contractual. It's just that the mid-semester day at the high school is used between 2 semesters for the high school people to get ready, and that's been around for a while, but the in-service day has also been around for a while. It's a contractual day.
Has it not been on in January then? I don't ever remember K-8 having off a day in January.
I know it's one, like that one exists. It may have slid around a little and I'll look, but it is a contractual PB day. So it's been around for at least like a few during this contract. As in-services get renegotiated, things get renegotiated, it can change. So that shifted to some beginning of the year. And I think that one has been since the latest contract has been there. Mid-semester is always between the two, at the high school to prepare and shift from one set of classes to the other. So that's all, just a couple of things.
Clerk?
Actually liked the early start date, but I'm willing to negotiate on that. In regards to the in-service days, because I was wondering, it's like, who voted on this calendar with the day off tomorrow? So my question about the in-service days, there's one in February, on February break, the 22nd, and there's one on January 27th of next year, which is a Friday. Is it contractual for 2?
These
Or
are,
one.
yeah, where you see in service days, it's contractual.
So 2 days is
Typically, yeah,
contractual.
yes.
Okay.
Generally that, but in the beginning of the year, service days are contractual. So that's, the ER days are a convention of our creation, but the in services are contractual.
Okay, so the ER days aren't contractual then?
ER days are at your discretion.
Okay, so in talking about the ER days, when I look at the calendar, and maybe I'm just thinking this way because I have younger kids, I look at November and I think, oh my God, the 3rd, the 4th, the 16th, the 23rd, I have to, those are 4 days that I either have to find coverage or take off from work just in 1 month. Whereas in October, it's 2 half days. So I'm just saying, as a working parent, October or November is a bigger struggle than October. So I'd be more for maybe getting rid of the 16th in November than the October day. But again, everything's negotiable, so just throwing that out there.
Oh, bringing up her point here, is there a way that we can do professional development? Well, I guess families are still leaving, so I was gonna say, if you can bump the 16th to the 23rd and have that take place, but I guess there's still staff is still leaving for vacations and stuff for the next day being Thanksgiving, so that's not, but that's where my mind is going. Gotcha.
I just wanted to make one comment. So I'm a little torn with the half-day discussion because I totally understand where Scrivener and Florida are coming from with parents struggling to find care on half days. Obviously, that's a issue. They did also want to point out that I do like what I've seen that staff is doing for those half days with the kids. I personally believe that their schedules are very rigorous, especially right now. And I mean, I think lunchtime is what, 20-25 minutes, and in the older years, they're not having recess either. These days are, they're SOAR days at TMS, that they're doing team-based activities in the room. I mean, my 11-year-old looks so forward to these half days because he actually gets to work with his friends and the teachers, and they all sign up for different activities. And I'm just of the belief that kids need that at any age. So I do like the way that they're using these half days with the kids, even if I'm not so concerned with the loss of learning on those particular days. I guess is what I'm saying.
Madam Chair, as to the hands are also coming up over here for some people.
Yeah, I just have my list going.
Yeah, of course. I just want to make sure
Yeah,
that
no,
I didn't hide that on you. Because it would be
I'm
my
okay.
fault,
She had
not
her
yours.
hand up when she was going, so
So that is
I'm
it.
all set.
Yeah, I just don't want you to, it's my fault if you miss it, because I'm trying to push it off in a corner.
And then I feel similarly about February break. I think it's been a rough couple of years, and I don't mind giving staff and kids and families another longer break to recharge. I get Jacob's point that it comes soon after Christmas break, but again, I just wanted to put that on the table. I think that they're good for mental health and social emotional health. And
Raising my hand back.
Yes. Don't worry, I have my list. Go ahead, Tony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me all right?
Oh,
Yes.
loud and clear.
Super loud.
Oh, sorry. No, and yeah, we did discuss this in policy, as Dr. Willett mentioned, and I guess, you know, as a parent, we're not thrilled with the various half days in there, and thank you, Dr. Willett, for showing us, you know, all of the development and the activities that you guys are having to do and squeeze into those days. So I can completely understand that, as well as the pushing the start date back a week. I can understand that given the late end of school that we're going to have here. I guess I'm on the same page as I think it was Jacob that was saying, as far as the February time. I mean, right after coming back from the Christmas break, and then with spring break happening, what is that, in April there? I just question adding the 2 days into that February to the already 3. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Jada?
I'll be short. I want to shift attention back to the beginning of the school year, which I think is a great idea to extend it a year, not a year, a week. This week has been extended a week. Mainly, and this is the first thing that came to my head for whatever reason, I was thinking about it the other day, is not just parents who have kids who might be going to college, as well as have a kid in TIS or TMS or something like that, and are trying to get from, let's say, Ohio back to Tolland by the 24th, because colleges go to school earlier than public school systems typically do. And that 24th date looks a week before the 31st. That looks like the ideal time for colleges to be heading back to school. I don't know that, but that's just my best guess. So avoiding that sort of conflict, because I deal with it at the end of the year with graduation and our Little League playoffs and how things clash, and it's just a mess. And so at the beginning of the year, I think it'd be beneficial to avoid as many conflicts as I possibly can. I think dropping off your child at college is a pretty big conflict with dropping off the other one at school in town. So I just want to take that into consideration.
So, Mr. Registrar, you thinking moving it up or back? Sorry.
Up, so
Earlier or
back, sorry.
later?
So the
starting later.
31st, right?
Starting later.
So shifting a week later to the 31st. This gives everyone more time.
Yeah, I kind of like that, but you sold me on this now.
I already went, so
Go ahead.
I'll come back to me later.
The only caution there to remember is you're going towards June 30th without any snow, I mean, June 20th without any snow days.
But that's just to start, but no, that's if we include February break as well.
Well,
So-
that's 2 days, so you'd be 2 days back from the 20th without any snow, I'm just saying.
So that's the 16th. So what we're saying is that
So
if
I'm
we
good
start
with it,
late,
but I'm just.
we have to add the 5 days onto the 8th. If we add February break, that's another 2 days, so that's a whole nother,
We get rid of January 27th, we save it.
yeah, but we still have to have.
You really, you.
But I'll give my suggestion after Dana goes.
Okay.
Dr.
Dana?
Sorry, we're counting.
Counting days.
You're at the 14th if you have the 4.
You have to go 100.
Sorry, we're counting days to figure out the things.
Question.
Thank you. So first, I am conflicted about the start date simply because we are going from a long year because we started late because of the Birch Grove move back in. I think if we were talking in a regular year that we were ending this year, I think I'd be more apt at starting earlier, but I hear what people are saying. Other than the 2 Birch Grove years, we typically started the Wednesday before Labor Day. I know that people get consistency, you know, they plan their vacations. I mean, even people have asked me, does the Board of Ed calendar come out months ago? Because they were planning to plan their vacations. I don't know. I think that there's opportunity to get closer to the 31st, but again, I'm flexible. Like Christina said, I'm willing to have the conversation to see what that looks like. But I also don't like going towards the end of June in school. Like that's pretty rough. I mean, we had summer fever at that point and kids are ready to get out, families are ready to have their mental health time and those kind of things. So I get very apprehensive pushing it further back to push it further into June. As far as I printed up this year's calendar and compared it to the projected new calendar. It looks like, because when we had all voted on those extra half days, we did it for, you know, professional development, mental health, all those, all the training, the things that Dr. Willett listed out. I definitely think in a lot of conversations I've had with educators and research that I've done is, albeit we're in the middle of COVID right now, and hopefully we're coming on, we're moving forward through it. This is going to be not just a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year healing process for our educators and our students. So providing those resources for an extended period of time, I don't think that just taking them off next year would behoove us. When I was going through the round robin last week, what I heard from our curriculum supervisors, our principals, our educators were that having these coachings and these coaching sessions, these training sessions, these PD sessions are paramount for them to continue to help implement the programs as they evolve. And that was a resounding thing that I heard in every room. And I stayed in the background, and so I was able to hit like six rooms, I think we hit, David, 6 or 7 rooms. And we kind of sat in the back, and that was just that was the thing that continued to echo through all the schools and for the curriculum supervisors and such. So although I am a dual working family, and yeah, the early releases, and tomorrow, yes, we have it off, and I get it, it's difficult to juggle, but I also have to think about what's best for all students' education and what's best for our educators implementing that. And if it's continuing their education and continuing their certifications and continuing strengthening them so that when they're in the classrooms, they can implement those strategies with their students, it's going to help us in the long run. So yes, I don't disagree. It's going to be a big struggle, not a big struggle for several families. Those working families, I totally understand that. The conferences, I think it goes one way or the other. So you have either early day and a full day off, or you go 2 full days off or a couple of half days. I think either way, parents are going to have to figure out a way to balance that. So I don't know if you're ever going to get a good balance that's going to be comfortable for working families when we have, but these are some of the things you have to do. It's so important that our families and our parents and our guardians are meeting with the educators having these conferences. I don't think there's any way around it. As far as the professional development, well, as far as October, we had the same 2 days in October early release last year as well. I think it's just the way the calendar fell. And then as far as the contractual date, it looks like the last couple calendar years, it was around the same time, that 27th-ish mark.
Yeah.
So I would be for the February vacation. I know this is a lot of time where folks get the winter blues. I hate to say, we keep talking about mental health and how important mental health is. People get the winter blues, and what a great opportunity to extend that and kind of, I think, Jen, you said recharge. Again, that would be one of those things that I'm flexible on discussing, because I also don't want to go, I guess I'm talking on both sides of my mouth, right? I don't want to go into the middle of June, but I'm also for some different reasons why having that February break would be paramount to, rejuvenating and such. The Christmas break and the holiday breaks, I don't know how many of you feel, doesn't feel like much of a break. It's stressful because you're going through all the holidays and some people are traveling different families. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of great opportunity for good solid discussion on multiple aspects. And thank you for putting the calendar together so we can discuss it.
And just a general reminder, some of the things that you see are part of the EastCon calendar. So like, we can't necessarily just jettison, say, for instance, and this isn't speaking directly to just like April break or whatever, we have to stick to when EastCon generally has that.
Actually, thank you.
Griffin, and then for.
I just had a really quick suggestion. Oh, my suggestion would be push it back to the 31st. Take the January 27th professional day and tack it on before school starts.
You can't do that. It's contraction.
So they can't have more than
You
three.
really cannot mess with the in-service days as a total. There's a certain number that have to happen prior to the school year begins, and then there's some during the year.
Okay, so it's contractual that they can only do 3 and they can't do 4.
Yeah, and it breaks down even more. It's 3 before the beginning of the year, and then the others are dispersed. And it's broken up even within those 3 points to, there's the teachers get 1.2 a prep day prior, that has to be allocated, plus the PD days. So it's the in-service days really are not the malleable piece of this. They're contractual. But the ER days are, whether you have February break, that type of thing. But anything you would want to do to in-service days, I would have to go look at, but I can tell you right now that it's typically those three. You can't add more to the beginning, generally. Shifting that around.
Okay. Okay.
That's
I'm-
all
I'm
bargaining
still-
unit,
I'm
so-
still in favor of the 31st. I don't like tacking on 5 days with these kind of random days off throughout the year, but then I would definitely not be in favor of February break, because if we've got a January 27th day off, we've got high school mid-semester break day off, and then we all know, was that just last Thursday? We had a snow day? Was there one the week before too? Like, I'm getting
There's
confused.
two, yeah.
So I'm like, we've got all these kind of random days off, so I would not be then in favor of extending. I'd rather see school start later than adding February break.
And just remember, you do make up your snow days unless the board decides to go from 182 to 108, which would also be a negotiated. We'd have to go to the union and talk about that.
Can you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
So when you have a snow day, it pushes it back. So you're not losing a school day, you're just extending the school year. The board does have the ability to ask me to go to the union and shorten the student year. Right now, the student school year is 182 days in Tolland. Teacher year is 188. We can't really do much with the 188 unless if you want to do 189, you have to pay them, you know what I mean? But with students, you could ask me to negotiate to reduce it to 180 and then take 2 days off the end of the year. That's how some places are handling remote. They'll say we're having remote, but really what they're doing is they're knocking off, because you can go as low as 180, but they're knocking off one of their extra student days.
We've done that several years too, haven't we, Dr. Willett, when we've had a lot of snow days? I remember there were a couple of years we had 183 days,
So what
and I
hap-
think we knocked it down to 180.
You could knock them off. You could take it for break days, but nobody likes that. There are things you can do, but your 182 days, that's another thing that you could ask me to do with the calendar. Those things, 182 to 180, ER days, or whether you have February or not. Anything in service, mostly contractual. So I would have to run bases on that, all around it, and it's pretty locked. Now, when we negotiate, that's something that can be negotiated.
Could we ask the teachers if they'd rather start on the 31st and do 4 in-service days?
I can
Can they
look
get a
for-
vote on that, basically?
I can look for an MOA, but when you do an MOA, we may want something, they may want something. You can do an MOA to adjust virtually anything, but you also, when you do engage in MOAs, typically there's an exchange of something for something. And it might also set the stage for the negotiation that's coming too. So there might be asked for additional, different things could be asked for.
You didn't have a chance, so.
Well, I was gonna say, the way I see it, there's really 3 issues. One, when are we starting school? February break and the in-service days are the main 3 issues. And my vote is we either have the school year start later and not have a February break, or have a February break and leave the school year starting as is. My vote would be for the February break, but I can hear we're split down, kind of down the middle about the February break. My ultimate vote would be one or the other. Like either we forego one and keep the other, just so that we're not going late into the school year. And I think it's a good compromise. As far as the in-service days, I remember last year how vital these, or the half days were to the teachers. They really expressed, Dr. Willett expressed how much that they rely on those days, and they collect data and they use that data to implement programs or fine tune whatever they're providing to our students. So I think the half days are really important. I do recognize that they're inconvenient for families, but I just think it's part of the mechanics of how the school systems run. So I think I have no problem with the half days as they are. And just like I said about whether we extend the school year, start later and no February, or February and leave it as, or February and leave it as is.
Smart decisions, because I was like, I don't know.
Convincing lawyer.
I'm like, done, sign up.
No, I mean, you do make a good point, because you know, if you start later and then you want to add, then you really are like adding a lot of things. So I mean, it's kind of like one or the other. So if you want to have a longer break, then start earlier, and then you're only adding another 2 days if you start as same, and then you keep the longer February, that would be 2 days added versus right now, you know, if you start later, then you add and then you add, and like, I have a problem going too late into June. I just think
It's just no fun.
it just gets a little crazy. Next on my list was Plord.
Yes, thank you. February break, I'm a no on that. I just feel like we just added those 2 days a couple years ago to have the small break. So I'm just a no on the February break. I feel, and maybe it's just because personally, you know, with the norovirus we had and the cough that wasn't COVID that we had and all the snow days that we had, and then my son went back to school for the first time today. And then tomorrow there's no school. I feel like he hasn't been in school in a month. So right now I'm like, no, he has to go to school. So I'm a no on February break. The half days, I'd like to see the 19th of October and the 16th of November cut, but I'm good with having one a month the rest of the time. And then April break, I know we can't change that, but is Stafford not part of EastCon? Because I noticed that,
Honestly, I don't know, but they are over past Ellington, and I can't remember who is.
because they have a different school break than us this year. So there's 2 weeks that
Honestly, I don't know.
some people may be struggling with Vernon and South Windsor, if their kids, you know, other kids go elsewhere. That's it, I was just wondering.
We wanted to get rid of October, one in October.
October 19th and November 16th. Oh, and then the conferences, a couple, might have been last year, someone emailed us about evening conferences for parents that couldn't get off of work. Is that negotiations? Okay.
Good thing you're in negotiations.
When's that start?
Next
Bring
year,
the notes down.
going in again,
I'm started.
going in.
Let's go to Jacob.
Just a, Dr. Willett, quick question for you. Last night on the town council call, you had mentioned that the fiscal year ends at the end of June. June or July, did you say?
The fiscal year always is June 30th
June 30th.
of every year.
So if the school year ended, say, June 28th, and there's 4 in-service days for the staff after, so they have to still go in the building and you know, finish out the year, that extends into July. So now are we dipping into the next budget if the school year goes until June 28th, or can this budget extend into?
Well,
July?
their payroll gets paid out, you
This
know,
might be-
22 pay periods regardless, and those are set ahead of time. I would not be a popular person at all if we were here or June 20th. You know, you might see me disappear or something, you know, but that generally people would react very negatively to that.
Yeah.
Right? But their pay periods, they get paid in 22 pay periods, so that would end before the 28th, they would still be
Gotcha.
working. If we pushed way out for some reason. And
I'm not saying that we should push way
I
out. I'm
think I
saying,
saw Twilight
imagine
an
if,
episode like that once and it wasn't good.
well, what I'm just saying is, imagine if, okay, we push back the week to the 31st. We've now added a February vacation, even though Sophia, I like what you just said, which is one or the other, so that, you know, it's still June 16th, but it's not June 21st. And so that's still 5 days better.
And I'm not criticizing it, I was just joking.
No, I got you. And so what I'm saying is, like, if snow pushes school back, say 5 days, and now we're pushing school back another, what? 3 days plus that, plus the 5, because we've added 3 days to February vacation. That's 8 days on top of June 8th as of right now. And so that goes to June 20th, and now imagine if you have another couple snow days. And so I was just curious.
No, you do, that's part of the peril in having a late end to the year, is if you know, New England adds snow days and then any other weird anomaly. One of the things that's interesting about New England is it doesn't have to be a snow day. What can happen, as we've all learned, is you could lose power, there could be no snow on the ground, and we can't run schools, or, it's weird stuff. So you can, never want to get too close to the end. We can't run school without the state's permission past the end of, I think, the last day of June. We can't. So we have to hit our days prior to that, or we have to go through a special process with the state. So generally, we want to stay within a range of, a reasonable range of the end of the year, so we don't get ourselves into any trouble. Which is why you'll always, most of the time, you'll see these ending from the 8th to the 12th or something like that. We try not to end. We don't try not to start with something that ends on the 20th if we can avoid it. Birch Grove was a unique situation.
Thank you.
Well, let's just check in. Oh, Tony and Bill just, okay, so you were next.
To Sophia's point of one or the other, did you say, Dr. Willett, that it was staff that was requesting both of those things? The February break and the-
Staff, I, talking with the teachers and others, there was a feeling that those two things.
Do we have a
They would
feeling
like
which
to
one they
offer
would
those.
prefer?
I don't think that they made a preference statement on it. I would guess that if I had to guess, I would say the preference, was, having 9 more weeks in the summer. Having said that, I think one or the other would be, doing one or the other would be a nod in the direction of trying to find a middle ground. The February days right now are the observance of the president's days. That's what's in there, plus that ends. So that, just keeping in mind, that's a federal thing too. Those, the ones that exist there. And you tag on, you would be tagging days on that.
Good thing this is a first read.
Quick question. So if we added February break, would the teachers still have to go in one day that week though? Because they have an
No,
in-service
if you
schedule?
did that, we would, we'd have to modify, either the answer would be yes. Right.
Then we end up with another day
We
off.
would push the in-service one way, or it would be a 4-day, the district would, the kids would have that whole week, and the teachers might have to work one day that week.
And I'm only saying, if we go to the 31st, we're only adding 4 days, right? Is that correct? So we'd be ending on the 14th? Okay, I thought somebody said the 16th. That was with February and the late. Okay, so we just.
Yeah, anywhere you start, there's going to be 3 in-service days that have to go prior to it. So if you started, going back, so if you started the 1st, you'd have to have the 29th, 30th, and 31st as in-service.
I mean, I'll be honest, like starting off, having that first like 3 days and then at least getting a day, kind of gets them back in the groove. I feel like we're throwing them, okay, if you go right now, you get 2 days, then a whole week, but then you get a day. So I do like
And
this.
isn't
one
there a
other
long weekend and
idea.
there's Labor Day? That's
Yes.
one of those weeks down too. Yeah, it's tough because it's always, you borrow from the beginning, you pay for it at the end. Or vice versa. And everybody knows Miss Cassidy's room is like a, in the summer, there are certain rooms that are closer to the sun for some reason. You have to amp up the AC, but getting later it tends to get hot. You could, and I hate to say this, this is a new thing and I never used to experience this, but I guess just throwing it out there, there are potential cancellations for 2 hot days. So if the day is overly hot, sometimes you can have a cancellation. on
We
an
had early
overlay.
releases one year, quite a few days.
Yeah,
for
or
too hot.
early releases. So that can hit you on the other end, talking about school days, that can hit you on the other end. now that
Yeah.
used to be a factor.
That's like these snow days that we have coming, that we're
Yeah.
starting.
Power outages,
so
snow days,
they-
weird other stuff,
I love how you say weird other stuff. It's so true.
New
There's
England
always
just
something
has the
weird.
weirdest,
Yeah, yeah.
Well, everybody, I think we had quite a good discussion about this calendar. I think it's a first read, and we might have to have some options to vote on, Dr. Willett. One or the other, I guess, is kind of the basics of what we're talking. And then we'll have to go through there, so think about it. Think it all
Right.
through. There's a lot of decisions to be made. Technically not really, 'cause I feel like you just gave us options about the ER days for the professional development and when we can start. In any case, let's move on to the legislative breakfast information. Great.
So every year, Ellington, Vernon, and Tolland, we take turns hosting the legislative breakfast. And so earlier about, on January 5th, I had posted something to hold the date, for the 31st, and then the 21st, I posted a flyer. And we're coming up on it. I posted the registration link, although thank you for your patience, because I realized it went to a page, rather than some direct registration. That was on me. But all board members who wish to attend, town officials who wish to attend, it's for that group and legislators themselves. It's an excellent event. Gives you an opportunity to interact with the legislators. Now, in the normal non-pandemic world, we're all actually in a room and you're grabbing coffee, you're sitting and talking with people and legislators and other colleagues of yours that are elected officials in other towns. This is going to be virtual, so it's great. Vernon's done an amazing job with it, but just knowing that's virtual, so maybe it's a little easier to jump in on. This year the conversation focal points are minority teacher recruitment, which across the state of Connecticut is a big deal. Remote learning, which is it's on topic of conversation right now as well, and public health policy that some of you may be very interested in. That's an opportunity to to be a part of that meeting and that breakfast. So you've done a great job. Registering is very appreciated. You'll see legislators there, and typically it'll start with very brief introductions. Often the host, superintendent, sometimes they'll include Mr. Nickel or Dr. Nickel and myself, saying a few quick words. A few other people. CABE is obviously one of the major sponsors of this, and does this in other places too. And you can see on that registration site, there's a series that they offer. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention for board members. We recognize this is part of our kind of legislative outreach type activity, and just make sure it was on your radar and you're aware.
Thank you. Any board member questions about the legislative breakfast? No.
Do we eat breakfast like on camera?
Yeah, the breakfast part is almost like
That was a bad joke.
that's fine. You can look at the menu, but you just can't eat
Gotcha.
from 80. That's kind of what you're going to feel there.
Gotcha.
But
I'll take that.
Okay, let's move on to the budget. So, I know that there are definitely some questions that we had posted onto our dashboard for conversation. I don't know if everyone would like to ask any sort of line questions that they had to start the conversation up, if there's particular areas. You did say that you, I'm looking at my screen, I'm trying to pull it up online, that you started to respond to those questions. So at this point, let's go ahead and have the board member conversation about the budget. And we can also include how we're going to work with the town council too on our budget once we are situated ourselves. So that could be whether or not how long the conversation goes about just our budget lines and talking about it. We can add that in as well. So are there any particular lines that anyone would like to speak about or any kind of programs? I mean, I think the one-on-one with the admins was fantastic. I mean, the board time to just get in there, and I did not follow the 20-minute rule of jumping from room to room. Guidelines, and not follow the guidelines. So I feel like I have a better understanding of why there are certain requests. So we can have those conversations. Anyone?
I'll go. I didn't have any questions on line items yet, as I see Jacob asked a lot, and Ashley, you asked a lot of what I had sent in. I only sent my questions in a night or two ago, so I didn't expect to see them on the spreadsheet yet. So I got to go through and read these. I just printed them out. But I think the two important things to me before I can vote is really the salary schedule. You had given us a nice spreadsheet last year that had everyone. I just want to know, like, how many vacancies we have, how long they've been vacant for, that type of thing.
Yeah, I'll generate that.
Because it looked like it was easy, because this was last year's.
I'll post and
Okay.
generate that. As I'm moving through the questions, I assume probably one of those touches on that,
Okay.
and I'll post it as a link.
Okay, as long as it wasn't too time consuming. And then my other question was the enrollment data by class instead of just the averages. Especially in the younger grades, I feel like it gives us a good idea of.
The enrollment report has that. The one that I
Did I miss
published
it?
on the dashboard has that. for
Okay.
K. It gets more difficult in the high school because you have many sections. And so, second version, I think, with high school, kind of like I did in the past, but the K-5 is there.
It's there, okay, then I missed it. So thank you.
Yeah.
That was all I had.
Unless I'm thinking of something else, but I think it's there on the dashboard. And I will link, as I'm moving through the questions, if when there is one enrollment, I will try to link documents that have been in other places so that you don't have to go running around for them, that you can just click it and wherever it lives, it pops up.
Okay.
So that's that.
Well, you certainly started answering a lot of my questions on here, so there's a lot of information that I can go through. Anyone else have any questions before conversation? Go ahead.
Okay. So I just noticed that you started answering the questions tonight, Dr. Will, so I'll have to look through those in more detail. And I know, I of course gave you a big favor and asked a bunch, so.
And,
31, there was 31.
Yeah, some of ours overlap though. So
When I
I
see
think
the whole
he's
thing,
gonna- So I think that he's gonna,
That's what I did.
it should start to roll now, because what I do is I do a lot of planning and gathering, and then I start shooting through them. So, some of them, people are asking similar or not exactly the same, and I will be able to move through them fairly quickly.
Okay, that's what I did all Martin Luther King Day, so we have a lot of time. But one question I thought I might ask here that I also asked on the dashboard was with the health insurance. I think on the December 8th meeting, you gave us a little preview about that. You mentioned there might be some savings in that. I don't know.
So we did for this budget do about 100,000, 123,000 of an offset for the 494.
Okay.
And at this time, I think that's where our we have locked in as an advisors saying where we should stay based on the uncertainty. The concern right now, I think we've done what reasonably we can. The concern right now is that people haven't been going to the doctor because there's been COVID, so they've been putting off a lot of things, and that you might get a surge coming. And so while we can use some, if they want to be a little conservative going beyond what we're doing now.
Okay, so that line, I think it's up a little bit, but we might have done that last year too, so it's kind of reflecting kind of a continuation.
Usually it'll pre-invest,
Yeah.
which lowers the general
Yeah,
over the year, and so we've done that.
okay,
That's the 494 this year is it's including a lot of the things I did try to do in the past.
yeah. I'll let a couple other people go. I've got a couple other comments. Save time for other people.
Want me to go?
go ahead.
All right.
I was waiting for you to go.
I
just so
know.
that you
Well,
can
I've got
just-
16 questions, but do you want them through your Q&A or you want me to start here? Actually, I think one of the more important things that we really need to discuss and come to a consensus on the board is, do we want to use any of the ERF? I think that really should be a top discussion, and we probably need, and I don't know if it's a vote or whatever, but I think we need to come to an agreement on how much, if any, do we want to use of the ERF. I think that could be a really good starting point in kind of continuing on with these budget discussions. So I don't know, Ashley, if you want to start there.
Yeah, no, I think that, no, that
Okay,
is
you
a
want me
good-
to
that
keep
is a
going?
good point, because I did have, even for the point of the technology with the Chromebooks, and if we can use some of that ERF money, I know I had asked, if I had gone back, what can we use to try to help the cost. So, you know, I definitely think the ERF is a big topic of discussion that we should, you know, let's start there. I think that's perfect. Let's see how board members feel about using ERF for technology, Chromebooks, things of that nature. That is going to be the topic for.
I'll start then and say I would be in favor of, I believe Dr. Willis said it was 206,000 is what's in the budget right now, and I would be in favor of using the ERF for that technology.
Because I mean, that definitely was one of my first questions, and I am pro, you know, for using that and not using the actual budget for that purpose.
All right.
What do we currently have in the ERF right now?
That 900,000.
Yeah, I'm in favor of it as well.
900, you know.
You can use it for, special education, technology capital. Just keep in the back of your minds that it's there for this purpose, so it's reasonable. Keep in the back of your minds that it's also for special ed, and we might have a really strange situation going on this year that we've never seen before. So we're trending quite heavy in special ed by hundreds and hundreds of thousands more than what we have seen. So it is something to keep in mind that that's one of the places we can go if we have unanticipated special ed. And when, you know, and it is very heavy. It's 300,000 in transportation alone, you know, probably 300,000 to 400,000 more than expected in services. That's just coming right out of COVID. And what we didn't use that, you know, what didn't happen last year is happening exponentially now. So
But that seems
makes
so
sense to
still
use
like
some
an
of it.
unknown, whereas the
well, it's one of those
biotechnology is
things
a
that
known.
can, you know, end of year. So it makes sense to protect, to use, you know, some ERF for the things that it was there to use for. But just keep in mind that you also want to be mindful that that is one of the biggest things that can just surprise jump on you. And that's why it's good to have an ERF with a special ed piece to it.
Can you break down the technology number for us? What's in that 200?
Yeah, I started to do that there. You are looking at about 202, roughly 06. But here, I think I actually broke it down. Well, here, yeah.
Was that an answer to my
It
question?
was one of the answers to the question. Yeah, I'm just trying to get this. It's probably not going to go well up there, but you'll have it. It's one of the Q&As as I'm answering now.
That's like my last question.
You'll
So
see it's,
all the
yeah,
way
I
down
broke
the
it down. I broke down all the potential costs you could use that for. Some of this will need further extrapolation. I'm going to be cleaning it up because I was just trying to, for time, get a lot of things in, but I think one of the last ones there was,
Well, let's get the answer to the.
yeah.
I thought I'd find it. Never mind, because then it goes into his.
It is in the 200, 206 range.
Fleur?
So in regards to technology coming out of the ERF, if it's an operating expense though, does that make sense? So if you're gonna have 200,000, and I'll just say Chromebooks, I'll throw it out there, that's gonna come out of there this year. And that's supposed to come out again next year and the year after, if you're replacing, I mean, that's why we voted no to have it in the capital budget, because then it kind of, you know, it's a reoccurring expense. So for me, it feels more like operating. But I also question, I think I sent this in. If we have roughly we have 2,200 kids, we have 2,348 laptops and desktops, 805 iPads, and 2,406 Chromebooks. Do we really need to buy more?
Well, it's not that. Some of them are labs, some of them
can-
are labs, some of them are staff. Like I can break it down. Remember, the 200 of those things came from a grant, you know, that we got from the state for teacher. Like there's a whole bunch of them that are not strictly student. This was part of the plan for 3 years ago. It seems like it couldn't have gone that fast, but I think it was literally 3 years ago. when we were talking about it, there was a plan put in front of you from ITET that had a regeneration cycle on it. So it's 2 grades. I think it's the 6th grade and the 9th grade. That's what the student impact is. But a lot of the devices that we have, currently the numbers we have are because of grants and other things we have. So the ones we're purchasing are replacing the ones from the class that are starting to become antiquated. And there is a question about, can you turn some of those in, and we're going to try. We can try to sell them back, for a certain, and then use that to offset and all that. But you don't know how successful you're going to be with that until you do it. But we will try. I'm trying to find, I know.
And is if we do buy technology, and then I've never been part of a bidding process on the board, is it possible to go to bid on
Well,
some of these items?
We use a state vendor that's already
Okay, so they've done the bidding process.
competitively, so we
Okay.
use Epic Gyre as a state vendor.
Although I have to say, if the FFC chair wants to use the IR, because I'll just put it out there, 5% is a high budget for me. I know people are gonna get mad at me for saying this, but I like low budgets. It's just me. Ask my husband. I made him sell his car. So I would like to see it lower, if we can use the ERF to get there. If we can look at some of these vacancies that we can't fill, and we can hire the staff that was asked of us. And maybe put some of those vacancies on hold, knowing that we either need to hire them back or, eliminate the position. And obviously that's your job, Dr. Willett, not ours, but I'm just trying to find ways to be efficient and get what we need, but at the same time, recognize that $2 million is a lot to ask of the taxpayers. Because I think our schools are great, and I think I see a lot of stuff. I see, a workbook and a Chromebook on my son's desk that he doesn't use. And so I feel like I've always said the boots on the ground are what I'd like to spend money on. And, if the workbooks, let's say the workbook on his desk isn't being used or the Chromebook isn't being used, where could it be used? If it's not being used in his class, and let's kind of repurpose and appreciate what we have already. That's basically where I'm coming from. But I can't vote on a 5% budget. I'm just saying it.
Yeah, from the staffing standpoint, just a question, is most districts in the state can't staff our schools, and that has other issues, meaning we have to be in compliance, things like that. So a lot of schools in the state like us are struggling to make sure we're compliant. So the positions that are there, if not filled, it's still kind of tricky that they're not filled. Struggle right
I'd like to bring that back to the ERF though, like how are members feeling about that? Raising your hand or just flipping a finger?
now. And that was your 731, and that's.
Yeah, 731, it's not on here.
So it is now.
Oh.
I thought I had paid, I thought I put it in, and
Yeah, I didn't see it.
so it's, it should be there.
Jacob was very nice and, separated everything. I just kind of said, bam, here you go.
Yeah, so you can see the 2 big ed ignitions.
So
at the
here,
156 and the
731
49.
is broken down for you, gotcha, when you asked, so 150, it goes through everything from the imports and everything. So for the ERF for the Chromebooks, I think that's the first big hurdle. Everybody, how do you feel, Sophia?
I'm for it. I think it's a great idea. And I think the Chromebooks and the technology are so necessary. My children are using them all the time, to the point where I'm contemplating buying them a second screen, so that when they're hooked up at home, it's bigger for them to work, and they have 2 screens like I have now at work. That's how much in the frequency that my children. Yeah, exactly. That's the amount that they're using it. At least my 2 are in high school, so I know that they're older, and that might be the difference. But yeah, I think this is absolutely necessary. I'm sure other districts have their students using this kind of technology. We want our students to be competitive and at least up to par. So yeah, I'm all for it. I'm all for taking it out of the ERF. Yeah, it's really important.
You take it down to about a 4.3.
Gotta keep on going.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So specifically about the ERF and the one-to-one, I think that makes sense. It's a decent reserve we have built up in there. And I prefer to use, the cash we have on hand. But I would add a couple of qualifiers for that. Number one, I just want to point out, as you alluded to earlier, Dr. Willett, a lot of those devices we got were due to grants. That's how we bought them in the first place, which is that's not going to be the way it is. That was mainly COVID-19 money. We're not going to keep getting those in the future. So we really need to think, intelligently about how we want to fund one-to-one going forward. I would prefer, procedurally that we take it out of the budget, that we don't authorize it to be taken out of the ERF immediately until after the FFC has met and had a bit more of a long-term discussion about how you want to fund it. Because I agree, it's helpful, talking to like the Tolland High School administrators in particularly, it's how they're very well integrated up into the classroom, and it's how the modern business world and college works. You have a laptop and you do a lot of good work with your laptop, so it makes sense. But we don't really have a very sustainable plan in place for funding it. And I really do feel that needs to be hashed out a little more. So those are my thoughts on it. Because if you did keep taking it out of the ERF year after year after year, you would drain that within 4 or 5 years, and that's not even considering any other expenses. So maybe one-time thing, but there's got to be thought out a bit more. And I agree with Christina. It's a very large ask, so it makes sense this year, but there's not more thought put into it than just always ERF. Perpetuity. Yeah.
Let's go to Tony. He has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And I think I agree a lot with what people are saying there. I certainly see the ERF in this situation as an opportunity to take care of what we have identified as a need, without overburdening, obviously the taxpayers that we've got here. But like Jacob said, and I think somebody else, that I'm concerned with, and we see it here, we see it in a couple other places, that we're very good at identifying needs, and Dr. Willett and your staff is amazing at finding some creative ways of purchasing those, be it the grants or donations and stuff, but we are not good at then looking at the sustainment and planning ahead. And so this isn't the first budget where we sat and looked at sustainment type issues and had to come up with a way of driving that down, rather than, looking at long-term planning. How do we keep the budget low and still pay for these repetitive type tasks? Thank you, ma'am.
I mean, I can pretty much look around the room, and I think everybody's kind of in agreement that the one-to-one with ERF this year is definitely the topic of conversations for whether FFC or, however you would like to handle that. I do think we can come back and strategically come up with a plan of how, we are going to look at that for the future years of coming, and knowing that this is an expense. But I think this is a starting place that at least we know going into this budget, if we can use that ERF funds for the technology, that would be a good start to take this 5% down. Because, as you can tell with my questions, I'm like, okay, what are we doing here? Go ahead.
To maintain one-to-one, do you foresee it being at this cost year over
Well,
year?
Yeah, basically what happens is the feed-ins are 8th grade, 6th grade and 9th grade is the cycle in. You can broaden that, try to do like a 6-year cycle, and I'll see if I can dig up the plan, because it talked about like what the cycle of renewal is. And if you go with like an 8-year cycle, everything's terribly antiquated, it starts falling apart, costing you a lot more money to try to keep repairs going on something instead of just replacing them, and then trying to surplus. The issue is, and this has actually been the thing that I've seen for decades, technology is great when you can acquire it. And then school districts have a hard time with a renewal is we will create a 5-year plan, but it will, I have seen more 5-year plans not get funded than get funded. And that's just a nature of sort of public process sometimes. So the thing we'd want to do in some manner or form, even if we didn't do it this year, is find a way to support that replenishing cycle. What's going to happen with these devices is almost everything is electronic. So most of those textbooks are going electronic, most of the resources are going electronic. It's different than the labs and replacing a lab. What we're doing now is this is a tool almost as important as a pencil. The kids, we've talked about this ad nauseum, so I won't go into it deeply, but the kids use it as an it's the video conferencing tool. It's all kinds of things now. They get access to Girls Who Code, get access to the nationwide Girls Who Code. They get opportunities by using these things that never were a part of my growing up. The Apple IIe sitting somewhere, or the PC 80, that was not you weren't connecting to anything. You really could say that's not part of my education, but you can't, no one can really say these are not part of the world or the education now. They really are. They're super embedded. So it's the textbook, it's the pencil, it's the TI-99 kind of calculator, TI-84 calculator. It is the thing they're using.
Can you explain why is the grade 9 number so vastly larger than the grade 3?
Those are grade 3s are Chromebooks, and the grade 9s are the more capable, not capable. They're more, you can do more because the software at the high school requires more power. So usually it's that, and there's more. They're PC, they're laptops.
I agree with you completely. I mean, one-to-one technology is extremely important, and our students deserve to be in the same playing field as everyone else. So I definitely understand the need for a plan, but I definitely don't want to go backwards.
I mean, again, it's hard for us to, you're handing in a paper today, you're handing it in virtually. They're correcting it virtually, they're responding virtually, they're editing it in a group. It's so different than what, a lot of us kind of grew up with.
Jen, what page are you referencing?
It's right on it's on the Board of Education, the questions.
It's one of the
It's on the question, I mean,
It's
it's
on
on
mine.
mine.
It's
Yeah,
the
we were
last
trying to find it.
item
Yeah.
under my
It's right
question.
here.
As soon
Thank you.
as we, I'm going to these and then I'll publish them, but that's.
Oh, I have it open, I just couldn't find it.
The grade 9 tech initiative devices was 156.8 and the grade 3 was 49.8. That's why I asked the question. And it makes sense. Chromebooks are a lot more inexpensive than the devices the high schoolers are using.
Okay.
Jaden, you had your hand.
Yeah, I have one of these, what I been calling rookie questions again. Can a parent opt out of receiving technology from the school system? Meaning if they've already got something that works, they want to save a laptop for a student that doesn't have one because they don't have enough laptops, whatever it is. Can they opt out of that? Or that's
Well, parents run the show in the end because, if you give somebody something, they can just throw it in the corner of the closet. But when we give you the machine, it has our configured stuff on it.
Gotcha.
And so if you try to use your own, it runs into our firewalls and it runs into everything else. And it may not have the software or the licenses or any of that stuff. So that's why, again, when you're walking into a school in the United States today, with these Chromebooks, with these laptops, you're walking into a world of resources that are all the textbooks, all the connections, all the productivity. And if you have your own, a lot of times it has issues. Wi-Fi connecting, other things. It's just that's why we prefer people use the district. Somebody could say, "I'm not doing it," and then we do our best to help.
Go ahead. So I just had 2 questions. Sorry, I didn't see this, so I'm looking at it now. The grade 9. So the current class of 2022, are all of their laptops basically obsolete and we can't kind of clean them up for the incoming grade
Well,
9?
I'm gonna republish that
Okay.
report for the board, and then, you know, wherever else we want to put it. And that'll answer more of those questions about why the cycle is what it is.
Okay.
That's probably the best way to go with that. But in general terms, it has that and it is actually not in the years that I've seen this. What was proposed as part of this renewal plan is not crazy. Like it's typical for the hardware world, things like that.
And then the Promethean boards, if we are, especially in TMS and THS, is that something that we really need to invest in when our students do have these brand new devices?
The Promethean boards that are in this, so scroll down to it, are, these I think are replacement Prometheans. So every year, they do go and die, so these are ones that are being put into circulation so that we have them and build up a certain number in the district so that if they, as they start to die out, we still have Prometheans. They came in a few years ago to replace smart boards, and the smart boards were actually a much more tedious technology because you had a projector and a board and a touch sensitive, kind of pen thing. And those were a lesson, they died pretty hard, and we still have them some places. We still haven't moved Prometheans in everywhere that we need to. And as the Prometheans start to go, we want to put in the, replace the Prometheans like in any other piece of hardware. Now, you can choose not to do that.
I'm just curious, because I just remember us talking about Promethean boards 2 years ago, which was way before COVID and way before.
I think it was for Bergstrom.
Right now,
Yeah, it
they're,
was before like we had all this one-to-one technology. So that's why I'm just curious. It's like, do we really need both? Can we hold off on the
well,
Promethean
what's happening is
boards?
they're replacing, you can hold up, you're the board, you can hold up on anything, right? But they're replacing the projectors. So you'll notice you walk through the high school, there's still a lot of like short throw or long throw projectors. The hard part about the projectors, and if anyone's ever owned these, the bulbs are the thing that kills you. They're hugely expensive. The components are hugely expensive. And then they're hard to get, enough of an inventory to match everything you have. They end up costing a lot more than buying the Promethean to replace it. So most of those Prometheans are going in through a cycle to replace these short throw and long throw projectors. So we still have them. When you're walking around the high school, you would notice more of them than you would notice Prometheans. But the Prometheans are replacing them at not too much different quality projector costs.
But did anyone go into the room with the computer guy? Because I did, and he was on.
He was on, yeah, Mr.
And let me just
Sharon.
tell you something,
was on
there is a
Prometheus.
lag between the voice and his mouth moving, and that was throwing me off. I can't sit like,
Yeah. At the open house, I feel like they were all off. And like the teachers kept touching them and like nothing was happening. So I don't know if that is an old one or a new one.
Yeah, we do have our moments, A lot of times when things are off, it has to do with network.
I hope, yeah.
Network.
well, that was, I was like talking to him and I was hearing his voice, and then it was like 5 minutes later, his mouth was moving very fast. So I was like, okay, I gotta leave.
You can certainly throw off a class if a bulb is out or for whatever's wrong. I mean, Jacob, you probably remember this again. I mean, if the board is broken, class is now, the teacher speaks for 80 minutes instead of we're reviewing something on a board visually. It's just a lot different of a learning style. So I think staying on top of this
Well,
helps.
in an example, Google Earth power, and through Prometheans, you can expand and, move things. It's just the way everything has kind of gone, where we don't have the drag down McNally maps that were only good for, 2 years. Now, borders change, God help the Ukraine, I hope that doesn't change. But the point is, like, things change very rapidly, and the Prometheans, you log in, you open Google Earth, you drag that section out, open it, it's all there, it's updated. You can stand on Kilimanjaro, or you can see the map of whatever, zoom in on the satellite. This is today's education, and those are the technologies that make that possible. You can't do that with the Chromebooks, the way they're set up. Sorry, not Chromebooks, projectors, short throw, long throw projectors, that type of thing. That's not how they work. And the key is the quality projectors. The Prometheans are not that much, more than a quality projector. The projectors are now so old and aging and that they are a real hard thing to try to maintain. Those bulbs cost a tremendous amount of money. By the time you've replaced a couple of bulbs, you might as well have just bought them from EDN. And you have to store the bulbs and they have a shelf life. And they all have different configuration of bulb types, and you're ordering them most of the time from China. So, and you're running into supply chain stuff, and that happens anywhere, but it is a real headache to try to maintain multiple different kinds of projectors and of an aging system. So that these come in and they're on a slow, reasonable replacement cycle for those projectors.
Okay, I think we've got technology down pretty well, so I'd like to jump to the course reimbursement. As you know, that's been one that I've asked you year and year and year. I still want to see that down to 30,000. I know that you say you have received one teacher with, so that's 10,000, but we have yet to go and hit that 50,000 in all the years that I've been on the board. So that line 250, the course reimbursement. Go ahead, Jacob.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't advocate cutting it completely, but I think you
With 30,000 is what I was feeling
to
comfortable with.
30,000 to budget for that line or 30.
That line is usually a roll up of two other lines, but
Okay.
So
And
what two lines, hold on. What
it's,
two lines-
I have to try to, I don't remember like that line of 50 is usually, there's two things. There's
For the
two-
course reimbursement and then
and there's something else,
the degree change.
degree change. And the
So that
degree
would be like a
change is the
bump in
kicker.
salary?
So the degree change is one of the bigger like smacks in the face, because a degree change, if you look at the steps in the contracts, a degree change can be a pretty big leap. That can be that was, I think, 8,000, like one swoop for one person, 10,000, in another. So what happened in the distant past, as I look back, is they have played with this line, but they play with it, they get burned, and then they put it back. And so for a few years it stays, then a board does what you're doing, and so it's crazy, let's move it back. And then, 4 degree changes or so, 2 course things happen and it's way over. And, so it does go back and forth on a pendulum.
I think I'm willing to take that risk though.
And you're looking at 20,000.
This has been one of my questions since day one, and I keep been watching it, so. Well, we could get to that. Anyone else on that course reimbursement line? Any thoughts,
I just add, when it comes to trying to find, efficiencies in the budget, the last thing you want to touch is the stuff that kind of directly, like textbooks or teaching positions and things like that. So, looking at kind of how trends are working with some of the more overhead expenses, which I get that it's important, but that's a useful thing to do. And I agree. We haven't hit that number in a very long time. I don't think they're in 50,000 when I've been on the board. I think a few years past, we haven't come close to that. So I think it's a relatively safe risk to take to cut that down a little bit.
No, it is contractual, so, you just have to always have it.
Well, I'm not advocating.
Looks like it's not going, it's not happening this year. And that brings up another point with the whole postage conversation though. I mean, the postage is awfully high, and that was not on my question sheet per se, because obviously that we've definitely talked about postage to quite extent, and people don't understand, but like if you save on postage, you can save a freshman sport. So
Yeah, so the first two here, ERF Tech, course reimbursement, there's a reason, but understand postage, I would want to go back and really come back with, on the sheet, what the issues are. So for instance, it's not just like putting a stamp on a thing and sending it, it's our machines. I think that also ties into it. And those machines are costs, and things like that. So, things can get really tricky. And I just want to make sure that I'm doing full due diligence on something like that, because it does look innocuous, but that's one of those that bites you in the rear end once. So I just want to watch that. So I could put it on the watch list. And again, there's questions you're posing, and I'll give you the answers in the sheet. Go from there.
I didn't see if you had answered the question about the fixtures. And what line item was that? Because we were talking at one point about adding that FFC conversation with fixtures.
I think if you were talking, like, if you want it to come out of the ERF, but I
But I don't
think
think it's ERF, I think it was, if it's capital. Because
to go into our capital budget.
Furniture and fixtures, you could,
Furniture,
I mean,
you
you could
could.
try to do quasi capital with that one, but capital's usually boilers and things. It all depends on how we want to define capital and how, generally the town is defined capital. The other thing about furniture, fixtures and equipment, and particularly furniture and fixtures is, when I used to be a principal at the middle school, we had horrible furniture, and we tried everything to try to make it last as long as we could. And we put, tennis balls on the bottom of the chairs, there was a whole new flooring on that, and then the old chairs started ripping up the floor. Like, not having furniture fixture lines that people can then pull this stuff out of does have residual effects that you wouldn't necessarily think about. And that's part of the, being careful about that one. Like, and then if you take it out, it's a real build up the next year and the year after that as you try to put it back. And then what happens is people just don't put it back. And if you see, I don't know if there's any pictures available to you of the middle school circa 2006 or even 2012. It was really bad from the standpoint of the fixed, the furniture and stuff like that. It was causing damage, the way it was set up. So, it's a line that we just have to be careful about. Certainly I can explore anything and I'll answer all the things that, as I have started to here. But that's one, just watching out for doing too much of planting of it. You could, but then you're building it back in somewhere, and then people don't. They don't tend to put it back. Because that's added, and no one wants to get to a certain percentage.
I don't think you're talking about taking it out, though.
No,
You're
I'm
talking about funding it
Through
through
capital.
capital.
Right, but
Correct.
when you do, you reduce the budget by that amount, and it's not there next year or the year after.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we're at that point. And if we don't, unless we're sending a 5%, we're gonna have to,
Then with capital though, it's the longevity. Obviously, I was waiting for you to tell me that in 2010 that we still have, we take a picture of the classroom and it looks the same minus the parameter board. Like, that's what I thought you were going with that, but
No.
there is, those, like, we need to start funding, and this is to Jacob's point, not taking things away from our students by trying to get,
No, not at all. I have seen, like, if it, over a span of years, what happens is that it piles up and, maybe not this board. There will eventually be a board that has no ERF to go to and has nowhere to go for this. And that's how we end up with lockers falling out of the walls. When I was principal first at the middle school, they were falling out of the walls. And the school district did not have the resources to make that better for a while. And it was really, didn't look good at all for Tolland. Like, if you're moving into the town and they're walking through the middle school, that looked ridiculous. And it was, people would look at it and say, well, why the heck is that? What happened here? And it was just, there wasn't resources to make that any different. And how did you get to that point? Through attrition over a span of time of the, knocking down of those, those funds and relying on something else, and then it's not there.
well, I
So-
just think that we just have to put everything on the table to have those
Of course, but that's my job, is to say, oh, but watch out for this. You're gonna make a decision on it and I'm gonna support it, but that's the kind of thing you want to take from the ERF to offset things so that you can manage it, but take to a point and recognize that one outplacement for special ed is 100,000, 69,000 average, can be up to 164,000, transportation could be 30,000. That's what's going on right now. So we want to be, have that
Let's
for
keep
that.
going around here, because Sophia had a hand and I'll go.
Well, just a quick question. You said that in the past that the furniture in the middle school was actually damaging the floors and it wasn't in good condition. How was that rectified? How was that money
Tennis
found?
balls, and
What?
then, it's still not entirely rectified if you walk around. Take a look at it. Just look at it yourselves. And you can't use the old school sealants on the floors. You have to use the new stuff. And they'll tell you that that's not as strong. So just take a look, go around sometime, we should, we haven't been able to do a facilities tour
We
because
should.
of COVID, but that was one of the things we were gonna do. And I'll point them out to you. Generally you get you get them as soon as you can, and we do try to replace them, but you'll see that in certain places, there's still stuff that we wish we could, make that different. And you're still gonna have school the next day with the floors getting, kind of messed up. But eventually it comes to roost, and it's either becoming a capital request or, taken away from some other request you might want to make for a science lab. You're gonna be making it for PVC tile, PVC tile or whatever. I'm not getting that right. It's PVT or something.
PVT, I think.
Yeah,
PVC is
you're
the pipes.
making it for the tiles and not for the science lab. You're making it for, things that aren't actually enhancing the educational experience because the other stuff got destroyed and. So, you definitely should and can use the ERF for the things, but then, be careful not to make that the solution for everything, as you're going through this, because that'll get hit.
What would be your recommendation to use the ERF for? If
I
you had
think
to
it makes
choose-
sense this year to use it for your technology. I would, as Mr. Mary said, I wouldn't go relying on it every year. You do have to build it into your operating at some point somewhere, or it's not sustainable. We'll always seek grants for it, things like that. I do think it makes sense. I, as a superintendent, I want to make sure that's there for special ed. I am worried about that. Probably more worried now than I have ever been. Because it's just coming off the pandemic. I haven't seen this much burn so fast because of services we must provide. And so that has raised my eyebrows. We are at even with excess costs coming in February and May, we are riding a very close line right now on, going way over on special ed because of the stuff that's going on that we have no control over. So I like having the ERF around for special ed. If we were ever in a place where we needed to push in special ed money from that fund, we could. So I think a use of technology makes sense, and that's a good chunk of your budget. You could take it down by a good chunk by that. But then I would just be careful about then using it as the strategy for too much more. Take your chunk, maybe 1% of your own budget from ERF. I wouldn't go beyond that. I would leave hundreds of thousands in there, maybe 500,000. Because if you go over in special ed by a couple 100,000, that fund is one that will save the day.
Are you all set? 'Cause
I'm all set.
Floor next.
So that was my question in regards to special ed. You seem to be very worried. Like, what's going on then with LEAP and the cost avoidance that were supposed to be helping us before the pandemic walk the budget back?
Would you be in an even worse situation without LEAP? LEAP has, I'm trying to think how many kids are in there. The students that are in the LEAP program, a good percentage of them would be going somewhere else at an even higher cost.
Okay.
So you are in a very fortunate place in that we have programs that have cost avoidance impacts. This is even with the buffer, the impact sort of springs we created for this. This is going above and beyond.
Okay.
And and we're not alone. It's just, it would not be a good management situation for me not to be worried about this, keeping an eye on it, because that's what you want me to do. We want to be. So again, it makes sense to use the ERF. I would say using up to 1% of it might be a reasonable idea, but I wouldn't go to it for everything. And when you do go to it for certain things, realize they're out of the budget, then not as part of operating. So the very next year, the next board will be grappling with a similar problem, but it won't be there as an option.
You all set? Let's go to Dina.
Well, with Christina's question, he sort of, yeah, my question wasn't the same, but he answered it about the special education. Because, I hear it in Dr. Willett's voice and in the conversations that we had. First of all, thank you for all the educators that were here last week, Dr. Willett, because that was a fantastic meeting and I appreciate them taking the time off. But everything that I heard from them was special education, recovery, mental health, resources. So I'm appreciative of your candor for the 500,000 for SPED and the emphasis that you're putting on the special education because of coming through this pandemic, like you said, even more so, it's exacerbated it. It's made it such a larger situation. I would be for putting money from the ERF towards technology. As Sophia was talking about, her students, albeit high school, live and breathe through those computers. And I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum. I have a second and a third grader, and I see that the same thing. I see the same thing. My second grader doesn't bring it home because I wouldn't trust a K or a second grade person to bring him home either, but my third grader brings it home. And they use that, the teachers, even in the second grade, the teachers are corresponding with the students via the parents. They use that daily, some even almost hourly, to communicate to those young students. It is, I mean, it's very different from when we were all going to school. Like you said, the TI-85, that was huge tech in the 90s, right? So, you know, my kids kids nowadays can work by iPhones and
Yeah,
things that are.
4A was the.
But so I had the 95, 94, the blue one and the black one. Anyways, that was high tech stuff, right? And now this is their life. I mean, they go on, they communicate to their educators. It was flawless when they were remote because of quarantine or what have you. Able to go jump right on there, but talk to the associate educators, talk to their teachers, send an email. You know, if you have questions on an assignment, even when we were doing I don't want to call it a round robin, when we had the TMS virtual walkthrough,
Yeah,
instructional
rounds, yeah.
walkthrough. I don't know how many of us attended, but
That'd be really good
they
for
were
you.
talking about that Chromebook and that need and how it's just so fluid. And the students can work peer to peer on those. But when we talk about this increase in this budget, this 5% or just shy, and Christina, I hear you because I'm a nitpicker with budget and with my budget at home, same thing. But I think I hear what we're talking about, what Dr. Willett is saying, and be careful what you pre-invest in and be careful what you take out, because we're at this 5% because we've pre-invested. And maybe it was not just last year or the year before, this could be years coming on, but we've continually talked about it in budget conversations. I've continued to listen when I was in the audience, and I've continued to hear when I'm in here, if we don't continue to fund what we have recurring year over year, we're swinging the pendulum because we pre-invested in so many things. And because we took stuff from other resources, it looks like, wow, we're raising this budget to 5%. Well, no, we are funding things that we've always had to fund, but we don't have those extra resources available to pay the bill. So that's why we're that high. Do I want it to be that high? Absolutely not. But do I want to continue to be a part of that problem to make it worse the next year? I think we need to be really thoughtful and savvy and really think about where we're going to do. I mean, I'm fine with this. And I agree with Jacob. We definitely need to figure out how we're going to handle this year over year over year, because we're going to be in the same discussion next year and the following year and so on and so forth. So we definitely need to be cognizant of that. But I think my other question is, and I don't know how far you want to go down, but how much of this 5%, and I know you have it in the budget, is contractual for its negotiations, right? So-
It's 47%.
It was right? What was it again?
Bargaining unit, off the top of my head, I have to look.
Yeah, I just have to go back
It's
and check it.
pushing 50%.
So 50% of the budget is because of contractual obligations that we had, that we were just getting people up to level set to where they should be. So I definitely think we need to be looking at that. So there's a lot of stuff when I was going through that round robin, listening to the educators saying, we're at bare bones. We're giving you our bare necessities, our bare needs. And one said, this is because we got bare bones last year. This is where I am because I can't go that far up. And I heard struggling. And that's tough to listen to your educators tell you that they need more, but they're just getting barely because they don't want to increase, you know what I mean? So I just think we need to be cognizant of that. There's a lot that goes into this 5%. It's not just because we're being extravagant and we want to have all these things. These are things that we need. These are things that our educators are telling us, this is what we need to continue to flourish our school system. And Sophia said something huge, is our students being competitive. Because if we start not being able to be competitive, and I'm not saying being overspenders, but if we don't start being competitive, we're going to start having more students outsource, go to other high schools and other, out of town, and that doesn't help with town public schools. So we just need to be cognizant of that, and I'm appreciative of grants and things to pay for these things, but what are, we we need to fix down the road, not just right here, and take that off the, I don't know if I'm saying it right. So that's where I'm at. I think we need to really kind of dissect where we can be budget conscious, but we also have to be aware of what we're doing down the road. And it's gonna be worse if we continue to do what we did previous. Thank you, Ashley.
Gotcha. You had your hand up.
So just quickly, we have 29 students right now. That was part of our conversation with Dr. Hess. So I just wanted to pivot a little bit. You know, we talked about special ed class, and I you know, it, overlaps a bit with social emotional health. In my discussions with Patty Haas, they even pointed out, you know, we have students right now who aren't even coming to school because of such increase in anxiety. That was, the question was, have your referrals gone up? Yes, they have, especially with anxiety. I think we're bringing in Connecticut Behavioral Health to help with those students who are home and unable to come to school. We talked about it being a priority this year and the profound impact that the pandemic has had. We talked about retaining the school counselor and the skills for adolescents teacher. In the conversations that we had with the administrators, it was a priority for them. The middle school administrators immediately discussed that was where they really needed help, was on social emotional health, mental health. Mr. Tolland and Ms. Marinan from the high school were very impressive with the things that they were discussing, that they utilize at the high school, the ruler training, which I know is used across the district, the student intervention team. So Dr. Hess again pointed out that we do have a social worker at Birch Grove because they didn't have a guidance counselor at schools like colleges. We don't have a social worker at any of the other schools. We do have one in Leap, I think 2 in Leap, one that does sit on the student intervention team. So I guess I'm just looking at, you know, when I look at like school counseling services line, I see, you know, a 0 increase. Where else are we increasing programs or services that go into helping with this increase in anxiety and depression and what we're seeing coming out of the pandemic?
Well, I mean, we're not making a dramatic increase from a standpoint of budget, but a position that's transitioning from grant to budget, from the standpoint of dollars, is counseling in the middle school. So you're basically adding to operating that counselor at the middle school. The middle school has needed that and continued to want that. And that was part of skills for adolescents and all of those things. So it's, we have a robust system of helping kids, with the standpoint of school counseling, and what we provide. And I was talking to the mental health task force about this, but you do have, some grants that have picked these up and will continue to pick up some things. Eventually, they end up get transitioned to the budget. So, we do, we have a lot of programs like the SEL program, social emotional learning, things like that, that there are teaching teams working on that, that are going to embed that in classes and things. But, we're not adding a tremendous amount of other things right now. The 494 is really not adding a whole lot. It's just kind of sustaining. We're trying to sustain.
I was kind of hoping for an increase in some of our programs and our services, considering where we are right now.
Well, we are increasing our programs from our execution. I mean, we have more than we have had, skills for adolescents, that came in recently and has helped that SEL programming, the teams that are embedding that's Yale Rulers program, social emotional regulation, all of that. you know, these are all things that we're doing, but you'll notice there's a tremendous kind of a fee increase on that right now. Right, but it's, you know, it's, the district has more resources than it ever has in the past. The counselors are, you know, we're giving training and doing all kinds of things to help.
Dr. Will, the sentence you just used, the district has more resources than it's ever had. That's one thing. Does the district have enough resources sort of ratioing against what it needs? So what does it need versus what does it have? Where's that? It's a very generalized question, but I had a different question I planned on asking, but just to sum it up really quickly, where are we in terms of what we need versus what we have?
Well, I mean, you'll note that most articles across, you know, the United States talk about the needs are greatly exceeding what all districts have. When I say we have more, I'm speaking of, you know, we have incorporated programming that has provided better opportunities for children, you know, in district and in their own town. Tolland Transition Academy, the LEAP programs, life skills, things like that. We greatly expanded our abilities. And those are great programs for kids. They're better for children, better to be in the town, better in our programming. We offer as good as anywhere for that here or outplace. And that also, you know, in addition to being better for children, is a cost avoidance measure for us. Now, when you have a, you know, social worker, you know, that is working in a program like LEAP, they also do help in other areas. You can't, you know, 100% assign them to another area per se, but they do help. Like in my team of people that I use for associate educators, I also work in and work with one of the social workers. When I have a meeting with all the counselors, we include the social workers that are available in the district. So it's simply that, you know, we have done a good job in this district of maximizing opportunity with the number of resources and staff we have. You know, what could we use? I mean, we certainly could use more mental health resources. But if I did include a lot more in this particular budget, the budget would be even higher than 494 at this time. So I'm trying to balance it out, but we're making great program advances because the social emotional learning program, you know, the ruler program through Yale is a very robust, powerful program with a lot of social emotional regulation opportunities. Helps kids learn about their own emotions, helps the staff, you know, actually give some of the things. And so these are going to help a lot. At the end of the day, if I, you know, being completely frank, if a child needs help with OCD, the schools are not going to be able to serve that child with that particular help. You know, they're going to be in a situation where, you know, our counselors can do baseline help, but if they have a significant challenge with OCD, they have to usually find a specialist that can help them with that. Generalized anxiety disorder and some panic disorders, we can provide assistance on the day-to-day, but a child who has a severe anxiety disorder, general, you know, GAD or going into panic, you know, that type of thing, you know, major depressive disorder, any of these things, you need a therapist. You know, you have, you know, generally have to find a person who specializes in those areas. The IOL has specialization programs. So, you know, we do baseline, we work with people, you know, from, you know, community and things like that. And we will get the opportunity to talk to service providers and, you know, and sign agreements and share, you know, confidentiality agreement. But you know, that's where the rubber hits the road with mental health. And that's why the mental health task force is in town too, because, you know, if you have a child who's struggling and the family's trying to help, and they go to a place, you know, like, I don't know, yeah, well, there's no beds. There's no beds. The school can't do anything about that. We can support it on a day-to-day, but when there's no beds at a, say, a treatment center, there's no beds at the treatment center. And that's our societal challenge, right? When you have HDHPs and people can't pay the deductible because, you know, the deductibles can be kind of high and they have to make a decision, you know, that can be a problem for a family. You know, this is $175 per session, you know, so the school district provides a lot of supports and provides the day-to-day supports for children and does, you know, uses the Columbia assessment. We've made great advances in that. The counselors have worked on that it involved that. We're working on the Virginia code assessment for the schools, the administrators, adding that to our planning. We've done a lot of focus on these things and a lot of advances on these things, but you know, we also as a culture have to be looking at, you know, what's available to children, you know, when they have a significant challenge.
And then my initial question was kind of related, not entirely. It shows that we are losing 3 paras heading into the fiscal year 23. The impact that's going to have, I mean, I know it's just 1 per building, but the impact that 1 para, we had talked with the administrators from TIS, and they had said even 1 or 2 paras missing, it changes up the entire schedule of how they schedule them, and they're already scheduling them like craziness, and they're 50 minutes here, they're 40 minutes there, they're 30 minutes. So my question is, what further impact is losing more paras going to do to the Tolland school system? And are those positions that in 4 years from now, 5 years from now, you could see coming back? Or could you see there being a possibility now we keep those 3 para positions? Or final option, those folks are leaving regardless.
Well, you know, what's hard about FTE, which is usually it's algebraic calculating equation here, is when we talk FTE, we may be a little lower on FTE. That's going to fluctuate up and down as the year goes on, as you know, IP programming and things like that. Need, you know, positions that we have to bring in for a purpose. AVIS is, you know, things like that. So they're not really, I didn't take any paras out in this budget. We moved paras, you know, we moved staff off and on grants. Some grants ended, you know, so we didn't do a massive cutting of paras. You know, one thing that we are struggling with is we can't find people to work. You know, that's the problem right now, is not a lot of people necessarily want to do that job. So we didn't make any massive reduction in paras. Could we use more paras? Yeah, you know, but from an FTE standpoint, you know, we're on paper down FTE. Next month, if we have 3 kids move in who need one-to-ones, that's going to go up. That's how that works. You know, you have to bring in staff, or you have to pull in consulting staff, which is much more expensive. So FTE always follows a general kind of line as you go through the years. And that's why it's hard to answer an FTE question like in a meeting like this. You just have to post it on that, you know, post it as a question, and I'll go into depth with an answer so you can get a better sense of it. But, you know, when you look at FTE in the trajectory of decades, you can see change. When you look at the FTE trajectory of a year or two, it's going to fluctuate up and down based on things that we can't control to some extent. So they are right in saying they could use more paras. We didn't reduce a tremendous number of paras in this budget, really. We transitioned some off grant, some grants ended, things like that.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for the clarification, because I think, I mean, everyone in this room can agree that paras are an important asset to any school system. But the public, I think, if you've been on social media in the last 2 months, there's just been a lot of support for our paras, because our paras are pretty awesome. And so I just wanted to make sure that that was sort of made clear, not just for myself, but for anybody who was confused alongside myself. So thank you for that.
Let's go to Tony. He had his hand up.
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. Just to change the direction a little bit, I'm curious in the whole analyzing of things as you came to put this together. What was on the other side? What are the programs or things did you look at and say that they've run their course, or the need was no longer what it was, and thus we've reduced the ask in those areas?
Well, we did take, I published this, I think it was H4. I have to go back and look at one of the previous meetings that kind of covered budget. We made a lot of technology reductions. I know it doesn't necessarily, there's a lot of tech in there, but I took a lot of technology that had been requested, and I cut 70,000 of that. We did make a health insurance adjustment of 120,000. That was to get to the 4.94. In the past, we've done some things when COVID allowed it, providing positions. That's not as much of a possibility at this point. I've been trying to explore in the past, again, any program that we could provide just as well or better than any other place, we will try to do it. So you'll notice that, all of those programs we have are programs to that end. We are getting to the end of the point in time in which we've tried and changed and made a lot of adjustments. We got great, we've received great benefits from those adjustments. I was going to use 33, but right now it looks like 29, and that can change, for Lee, for instance, but that 29 ain't going somewhere else, and we're providing great services for them. So the point is, we have pretty much come to the edge of the programming and the things that we've been doing. Now, something, if we do take it away, it does have, residual impacts. So, we're going to continue to look at that and try to do what we can and do more with what we have. But, we have been doing that. That's why, though, you'll notice, I think there was on H4, H1 or something, the request was for many positions. Do you remember that H1? And out of all of those positions, the ones that are in the budget are the ones that we really need, for reasons like, statutory course that we have to teach, social and emotional health with, keeping the counselors in there, trying to do what we can with all the grants that we've been able to yield, everywhere we can get a grant, do it. Every time a grant comes on the radar, we get it. In this district, I do quite a few of your grants. Tess does quite a few grants. We grab every single grant we could possibly get. We have hundreds of thousands of dollars of grants. Even things like the ASSG grant, we'll grab that, do it. So we leverage everything we can possibly leverage. And when a grant comes on the radar, we go after it, just like for the personal finance. I'm going to be hunting for a grant for the personal finance class to try to do some, with that as it comes online. And social worker, it looks like, we're able to take and get that fully funded from a grant instead of adding that to the budget, because that would be a 0.35 hit on operating, but we're going to be able to do it without doing that. We take every possible opportunity we can to offset it, which is another reason why, if I can get a grant and it provides you with a little money at the end of the year because we got a grant, you want me to do that, not ride it to the razor's edge. And that's what I try to do here. So sometimes we get great benefit out of it. But we have, we reduce technology. We have combined some operations. We have all of the cost avoidance offsetting programs that you're familiar with under the Lighthouse programming. And these are some of the major ways that we try to make sure that we're getting the biggest bang for the buck. We also have relationships with other programs in towns. Our relationships with other towns brings money, into the district too. Which you'll see, Open Choice program. If you look at that page, there's some benefits from a learning, social emotional and learning and standpoint like that. But it also has some other benefits that that are great for all the communities involved. So it's we do and have leveraged a lot of things. ECHIP, you're part of a self-insured consortium, and I am the chair of that consortium, and we do a great job for Tolland. That consortium does a great job for Tolland. That was the brainchild that goes way back. Steve Wardner was one of the people that really got that going, and that's been something greatly benefiting Tolland. That you're able to leverage and have really affordable, really great opportunity like 123 to take off. That's largely because of that. You have USIF, Utility Internal Service Fund. That is something that provided efficiencies. So that was a funding mechanism that the town and the board used in cooperation. That actually does reduce your energy costs and saves just a lot of money. In the town, you have a lot of mechanisms created to maximize your opportunities and to look for efficiencies everywhere we can find them. And so we'll continue to do that. If I see opportunities to do that, we'll continue to try to do that.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
When you're talking about staffing, I will say the numeracy staff, that sounded really exciting. I don't know if anyone talked to the admins about that. No, no one asked. Oh, I'm excited about, huh?
I asked.
You asked, see, you came in after me. I am excited about that position because I do think it'll help out the high school and I believe it was middle school, correct, that they're going to be going back and forth.
There would be, that would be TMS, THS.
Yeah, I was excited about that. The maintenance person, you brought up operations too, just for clarifications, because from my understanding, the maintenance person is going part-time. We're bringing a position on, but eventually that part-time position will probably phase out and then we'll have this other person.
Yeah, and we're talking about, right, people, so it's, yeah, and so we're looking at, working with the people that are there, with their comfort about what they, want, and it turns out that, the desires of our personnel, facilities personnel are meshing pretty well with our budget needs. And that would allow us then to operate roughly with, 0.6 that, but we get a person plus the person that we're keeping is a highly experienced person with certifications and things that greatly assist the district because you do not, there are so many places where you're not having to pay outside people. I mean, we always have to pay certain outside costs, but the facility staff we have right now has been here for generations, literally, has received a tremendous amount of training and we've invested a lot. So they are able to do a lot for the district. Some districts our size will have more people doing this than we do. And these individuals are highly trained. They have certain things, doing all kinds of master locks and type things and electrical things, and they're helping us out. So this gives us the opportunity to help that group of people out for not that much more than what we have now. And it meshes with their personal objectives at the time.
But it was just one of those conversations. Anyone
So
else?
it's like a low hanging fruit for us as a district to add the facilities in there and try to do something.
But to add on that, isn't this, I think that this position, from what I understood, is this, the added position was to take a little bit of weight off of Pete to kind of, I mean, wasn't it you, John, that was talking about, did you meet with Pete?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you were talking about how these added positions are gonna help him throughout the entire district versus him kind of holding the entire burden. Great, that was what that was. And then the other person was eventually gonna retire that you were talking about, Ashley.
Well, at some point.
Things
Not
like-
not anytime
Not
soon.
immediately, but it was
That
to
was
get
the
this
one
other
who's gonna
person
be part-time.
acclimated so that they can have a nice smooth transition, from what I understand.
That's kind of what I got.
Yeah, that's what I was getting.
But and also what I noticed too is, Mr. Stava was more or less happy to, jointly use equipment between the town
Mhm.
and us. So I think that's another conversation that we have when we're talking about the machinery. And I did say that you can maybe perhaps give some lessons to him because you have the correct license for certain machinery. It was a good conversation with him. Like I said, it just, just going through and talking to everyone, it just gives you a different perspective.
Mhm.
Any other?
I do feel like we're on very different pages here. I feel like there's some of us who are very comfortable sending a 494 to the council, and I feel like there's some of us who are not. So I just wanna we only have one other meeting.
I think we should discuss about having another special
Okay,
session.
because
too.
I
You can add-
feel
you
like
do have
we're
some sort of bill.
very
My
far
thing
apart.
is you're
so-
having FFC on 2/2.
Yes,
So I think that it'd be great to have the FFC and then have a special session after that, if we can during that week. If that's
Okay.
possible.
Yeah,
That's what I was
that's-
thinking that was gonna be on my next radar.
Yeah,
Vote on the 9th.
you can
We have to
add,
vote
there
on
are
the
some on
ninth.
the calendar that you can add. Let me pull it up. It's online too. Let me just pull your budget calendar up. And everybody can see it at the same time. It
Yeah,
also helps us walk through this.
I mean, there's definitely, like you said, I think that there needs to be more discussions in terms of where everybody.
and I just kind of wanted to say, Dr. Willett, I understand what we're all saying. I absolutely in agreement. We do not want to take anything away from the students. I think the ads to our students and going forward and making sure that anything that we removed that you're still saying is important, that we still need to have, that we can put back. I really would like us to look a little bit further at some of these line items that are not student line items. And I just kind of did a brief review of Appendix F, my favorite. And there's a lot of things, just small amounts, but even auditing, for example, we have never expended the full amount we budgeted for the audit. Consulting, repairs and maintenance, technology repairs and maintenance, equipment repair, postage, advertising. I think it's important to look at some of that. I understand that, you know, $8,000, $10,000 isn't big dollar amounts, but when there's 15 of them, we could find efficiencies. Just because they were in the budget before doesn't mean we need them again. And I think that's kind of where we need to just kind of get confirmation from Dr. Willett that every program, every reading program, I mean, I know there's a ton of reading programs. Are we using all of them still? Is there a new program that is being used that's better than some of the old programs? Have we removed the old program from the budget? Because just adding 2 million, are we making sure that we're looking to see we're still using the money efficiently? And just because we're adding stuff, which I do think is important, there's a lot of things that we want to make sure our students have, but are we sure that we don't have anything sitting in the budget that, almost like Christina was alluding to, that's collecting dust? And I think that that's important, and I think that we need to look at that as well.
Yeah, and we've had this narrative before, and I think it makes sense. I think that what you'll find is when you do pose the questions and then I answer them, because I know yours are coming, yours just came, you'll get answers for the value of the programs. And then you have this sort of decision to make about, you know, where you know, the value is. That actually is, it's probably once you pose your questions and get the answers, we can have then the next stage of conversation about it. Most of the programs are set to the developmental levels of the kids. So even though you might have a 10, you know, these go to this developmental level, there's 13 grades. So they get divvied up around those areas, and they're used for things like TIS. They're used for their, you know, their learning lab block. Kill off a couple of those things and their learning lab block crumbles because they don't have this, you know, sometimes they'll use para and other staff in the learning labs to do certain things as they rotate. When those rotation possibilities are gone, that stops or has to be found in a different way. So, you know, the question will beget the answer, and then you have to make a choice. And where that choice, I think, probably ends up going is there'll be sort of this pressure of, well, can we do this, say, for the era? You know, we'll go back over there and say, well, you know, we don't want to necessarily knock off this program because it's a phonics program, and you know, it has many benefits that we would talk about. So let's instead maybe, you know, use X from the ERF to do that. And so I can see that that may be where we go into up to 1%, which again is like 400,000. That may be a good place to go this year. But the thing to keep in mind as a board, you cannot go there forever. And you also don't want to do too much chipping away at the programs that the staff and the supervisors have put in place, because they all build the brick house, you know, and take too many bricks out of that and it kind of comes down. It's not functional anymore. And I've seen that, you know, many years ago. I've seen it not working, you know, so you've got to really, this district has made it work really well. So there's been some stuff that we've already kind of taken out. And when you look at, you know, when you ask the question and you get the answer, you'll be able to then look at it and say, all right, well, I think we should go for furnitures and fixtures over, you know, this phonics program. And I would agree with that. Like when you're trying to decide what to do, I would not take a phonics program away. That would be the last thing I would do. I wouldn't do something as supervisor said we're really using and needing. Because it's all building blocks, it has a detrimental effect later. You know, so I wouldn't want to strip it away. You know, IM or bridges or these programs, they're the backbone of things that you don't want to mess with too much. But you know, you may decide that, you know, certain facilities things you can do as a capital, and you know, that's another way to go with it. Certain technology things you'll do as a capital, and that's another way to go with it. But hitting programs is starting to step into impacting the quality of education for the kids directly, and that can be tricky.
And just to follow up with
You
you,
don't get a
I
ton
did
out of it.
request that line 358 for the subscription, so we do have that on one of our answers.
Okay, I have that on my list.
Yep, so I
Okay,
have
I'll
that.
look at- I'll look
And
at your answers.
in 430 for the repair and maintenance, you broke that down, and 432, which I gotta be honest, Dr. Willett, so your response was, well, it was a one line. 20, it was about the 20,000, cost of repair and replacement to student devices.
Yeah.
I asked. Why?
Well, look, I was trying to get to a certain point before the meeting. You know what that is, yeah, that's a transition of, rather than getting insurance, that's.
Well,
paying
that's
for the
what, because I
repair.
had asked on
So-
the screen.
Is it a third party then who does
So,
that?
no, what we do
maintenance?
is we have our own, so, people pay into it, and we use that money to repair. The problem is you don't pay into it. People don't necessarily want to do that. And so when they don't do that, we're making it work right now, but it depends on where people go. So what I can see evolving over a span of time is if this is an educational resource like a book, you want me to insure, you never asked me to insure the $100 physics book that you were giving me. If it gets destroyed, it gets added to my accountabilities. But if you're not asking me to insure the social studies book and the physics book and whatever else, you're asking me to insure this device. And so people are coming at the district to some extent, some context, and saying, nope. And the problem is over time that creates an issue. So if we do want to do it, it's going to be something that once in the operating budget can cycle through and act like a resource. We do have, we used to have binding, we would rebind books and do things like that. These lines would go back into fixing the necessary educational devices. If we don't want to do that, which that could be something you knock right out of there, that's an easy 20 to take. The problem is that'll keep, that will then have us going back to the people for the insurance. And if they don't do it, we add it to their accountabilities. If we add it to their accountabilities and it follows them, that can create issues later. So it's just do we want to continue to do what we're doing with insurance and that type of thing, or do we want to, take that into operating?
Jacob, you had your hand.
Yeah, so I might need Christine's help with this one, because we talked a little bit about this one, but another line that I think I noticed doesn't really get spent all the way was facilities and maintenance line. I don't remember what object number that one was.
430.
That's
Okay.
430, so that's
Did he
on
answer
mine.
that?
Yeah, that's on mine.
Yeah. So, because one of the things I had in one of the conversations with Peter Stava was that there's a good amount in that line that's kind of built in for insurance, not insurance, but in case, you have a major repair, that might be one reason why we have a good amount left over every year up in that line. And he was talking about some big things, like if a boiler in the high school broke, which I know there's problems with that, but my question is, for something like that, like a big catastrophic failure of a system like that, would that be more appropriate if you tried to come to an understanding with the town about kind of using the unassigned fund balance for, instead of appropriating an amount like that in your operating budget year after year?
I think what he does is he rotates. He'll have a set of things and then the next year kind of has another. And what I'll say about that is, again, this is a hard thing to try to convey, but there isn't really a dollar in that doesn't get spent well for your district, because there's, for whatever you have listed here, and he does a very, very good job of this. Whatever you have listed here, a lot of times where the savings comes is he manages to execute that project for less. Some go more, but a lot more go less. And it's a lot of it because he puts in his own blood, sweat, and tears. He figures out ways to manage or leverage things. So, whenever that is, if it is, trending at some point low, which I'd have to go back over years to kind of explain how that really looks in its actual execution, that goes straight into something else for this district. So, What has managed to happen in this district is through what's, fairly well-managed modest, budgets from P. And if we go back over time, they're not out of whack with what people would be asking for these kinds of things. They go straight into other things the district has needed. And we did have failures, like at one point, I remember the piping or something at the high school kind of gave over the locker rooms. It was some kind of heating, it was kind of fluid or something. It just created an entire area of the high school we couldn't use. And that had to be used for that. It's difficult to go to the town and ask for some kind of unassigned or assigned fund pledge for something that happens like that. And so, when you have some flexibility, you can manage it. But hey, I don't know how to do this in a way that's convincing. I wish I could. The facilities as it used to function prior to P, when this budget was managed the way it was now, they were really, the people that had to do this were very hardworking people that did not have the resources to do it. And the buildings suffered very badly for that. The stuff that's happening now is putting back years and years of underfunding in facilities. And Pete would talk to you about that. If you ask him about it, he spent a lot of time saving a lot of money for the district, putting things in order that for I'm going to say decades, really, there just wasn't enough. So this is a very well managed line. Whatever isn't spent on what's there rolls into something else that has to happen in this district.
Well, it almost sounds like by that point, we should be cutting that line and putting that money somewhere else if it's being managed well. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, if it's kind of managed as well as it is, it seems almost like that's a little inflated.
I really don't feel like it is. I think what we want to do is you pose your question and I'll kind of give you the more detailed answer because, and you have actually, you have to get to yours. But I think when you see the detailed answer, it'll give you a better sense of whether you actually want to do anything different there. I would say that obviously the decisions you have to make are hard ones.
Yeah.
And if your desire here as a collective board is to reach a certain place, then, that conversation has to occur, and if you're going to take a percent out of ERF, there's a chunk out of that. Where else and how much lower you want to go, where you want to land. I would say if you're coming to me for that, there are places I would recommend to go. Some types of things like, maybe equipment and facilities are possibilities, but I would just want to caution. I have seen the other side of this, and it's not pretty at all. It's not. It's bad, and it costs the district a lot more. The district the whole town had to do a $9.6 million referendum to catch up, to amend or remedy the fact that there had been such poor facilities funding. There was $9.6 million that had to, they had in a referendum, they got some grants for it. So I think they ended up spending $4 million. That happened because of the old patterns. This was replacing it with a much better way of doing it. But if we chip too much away at that, you could be back in a very similar place where you don't see it right away. It looks great for a couple of years, but then somewhere along the line, you're coming up with another, multi-million-dollar referendum. So I'll be able to give you more extrapolation when I get through all of those questions.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your answer. Like I said, it's not an easy decision, and I won't vote for a budget that I think harms our schools, our students. But like I said, at the end of the day, we need a budget that will pass. And I'm legitimately concerned that this wouldn't get through. So I have to look at things like that, and I have to ask questions about it. And I think an FFC meeting, a special meeting, would be very helpful in continuing those conversations, because at the end of the day, we'll probably have to make some tough decisions upon this budget.
Any last items? There's obviously, there will be an FFC meeting on February 2nd. I would like to have a meeting after that is my kind of point, because I feel like there's a lot that you guys could go through, and I don't want to have like that same night, have you guys rush through like we did the other night. So, you know, maybe we'll follow up maybe even that Monday before or Wednesday. So once again, you have time after that meeting to create anything that you want to come out of that. We can maybe like Monday, go through it and then have another day to think about it and then be able to go on a budget on Wednesday. I mean, how does everyone feel about that? Sounds good.
Yeah,
So I don't even know what that Monday is.
31st.
You can add,
No,
No,
the
because it's
7th, yes,
after,
sorry.
after, so the 7th, the 7th. So I think we will find a location.
add a budget meeting for the 7th, yep.
You know, we'll have to go through that and find out where we can meet, but that way, like I said, at least FFC can meet and digest a little bit more from there, we don't talk again, digest, and then be able to come to the meeting on the 9th to have a vote.
Can I just say, I encourage everybody to come to FFC. So we can kind of hopefully get more questions answered at that meeting. When we do a deeper dive into the budget.
I feel like at least that's a little bit, at least we have another 2 meetings to kind of get more information and go through more items.
And I think you said you had some ready to put into the form.
Yes, I
So
will
now
do
would be a
that.
good time.
Okay, I wanted to look and see, so I wasn't repeating my
It's
16,
okay.
I could already
If
take off
people do,
3.
I just refer, like I'll put in a
Okay.
bookmark and you can click and it'll jump you back to.
I
another
feel bad
place.
that I just put mine all in one block, because then he just posted it all in
Posted
one
it
block.
all.
I should have.
I'll separate my
And
map.
yours was like 50 all in one.
Why
but
why
that's
don't you
okay.
let me have access to that and I can just kind of go through it and, you know, edit that Excel so we can kind of put lines, so it bumps it down, so it's not so. I
Oh,
mean,
no, it's fine.
Jacobs is very nicely, one question at a time.
Well, he pushed them in that way, but it's actually great. You guys, it's all gonna come together well, and I'll create, you know, links and things, go bounce you around, click and jump you up, jump you down.
Okay,
like
so
that.
everyone tentatively put that February 7th on your date, and location is to be determined.
And you know, as I'm listening to the things you're saying, I'm formulating, you know, chunks that I can throw back at you and say, you know, what I heard you say is you want technology, you know, things like postage considered, you know, that type of thing. So I'm building a list that, you know, can make it easier for us to move forward and do what we have to do for your Board of Ed adopted. So I'm making my little list of things as I hear you talk.
Perfect.
And we're gonna-
So at this time, was there any last minute thoughts? Because then I'm going to move on to the committee and liaison reports. Well, do you have something, Jaden?
No, I'll see. Thank you.
So let's move on to the committee and liaison reports. Once again, FFC is February 2nd. All are welcome.
All are welcome, February 2nd at 5:30, Dr. Willett's office. Yes, so we met kind of briefly last week because of the meetings with the admin. So we went over just our normal December 31st budget, and everything seemed to be, you know, on target there. There's nothing that kind of jumped out at us. We discussed food services and the new, was it state requirement, Dr. Willett, or federal?
Yeah, it's
Requirement.
honestly, I don't think it's federal, I think it's state
Okay, so
for us.
state requirement that basically if a student runs out of lunch money in their account, we are still obligated to give them up to 30 meals. So that could be a cost implication to us at some point. 'Cause, we don't know if our food services, since it's self-funded, if they can absorb that, depending on how many children will end up doing that. So that's something we're just going to keep an eye on for the future. That will go into effect next school year. And then we looked at obviously this budget. We talked about, I had presented to Dr. Willett kind of a 1-page reconciliation that he was going to have for us for the meeting that you all should be at next Wednesday. And just kind of breaking down some of the budget, like specifically the contractual obligations, the technology, what was the new position, specifically what was the salary increase for any of the new positions, what were out of the $475,000 of prepayments that we did in fiscal year 21 that carried over to fiscal 22. Out of that 475, what was definitively needing to be added back? And then the last section, I believe, just had kind of what were some other big budget numbers that are included in this new budget, just to kind of get an idea of exactly what's made up of that $2 million. So Dr. Willett and his staff are going to have that for us at the February 2nd FFC meeting. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, policy met today, Tony? You wanna do policy?
Yes, Madam Chair, we met a little bit ago. We, in addition to covering the school calendar, which you saw earlier, we also started looking at a couple of cleanup type policies. For example, 5020, which is a sample notification regarding student attendance, and 5041, which covers bus cameras. The conversations for both of those centered around whether or not those policies were, one, even needed, or two, already covered in other policies that we had, in which case these would then be recommended to be removed. There's a little bit of the legal basis that Dr. Willett is going to chase, and then the committee will make its final recommendations to the board. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. And you reviewed this calendar?
Yep, reviewed the calendar. Yes.
Perfect. Communications.
Yep, we met on Monday. We had a discussion regarding social media communication and practices that we agreed to continue to look at and discuss going forward. We also discussed proactively engaging the town council before the joint budget meeting. We suggested the possibility of sending a letter encouraging them to reach out to Dr. Willett before the meeting if they would like to meet with him, as well as providing a one-pager from FFC in advance, and possibly providing to council the Q&A doc questions that were asked by the board and the answers that were provided to those questions. And Dr. Willett also stated that any member of the community or town council can meet with him individually at any time to ask budget questions or any other questions they may have. And then we have just some updates from the parent-teacher organizations in the community. So TEPTO's Spreading Kindness fundraiser has ended, but just a reminder that if you did order a sign and you were unable to pick it up today, they have canceled the scheduled Saturday pickup because of the inclement weather. So you've already been contacted by Bethany Lesko, but if you haven't heard from her, contact her. Their next virtual only meeting is February 2nd at 7. You can find the Zoom link for that on their website. The TMS PTO is having a fundraiser at Camille's tomorrow night from 4 to 8 p.m. for either dine-in or pickup. And just a reminder that they're doing their Munson's chocolate fundraiser from 2:21 to 3:10 with an April pickup. And their next virtual only meeting is February 8th at 7 p.m. And their Google Meet link is on their website. The Tolland High School Booster Club senior banners and graduation lawn signs are now for sale with a deadline of April 26th. You can find the order information on Facebook and their website. Their bottle and clothing drive is coming up on 3/26. And they, again, are asking for volunteers to help plan for their annual Eagle Scramble, which takes place in September. They have a hybrid meeting in the THS library on February 15th at 6:30, and their online link is on their website. And then also the Tolland Education Foundation is running their Valentine's Day Cookie Kit fundraiser until February 3rd with a pickup on February 10th at the Tolland Public Library from 4 to 7. And as of today, they're down to their last 20 kits, so which is great for them. So if you're interested, please place your order as soon as possible. You can do that on the TEF website. And again, the contact information for everything I mentioned can all be found on their respective websites. But if you have any trouble finding it, just contact me and I'll point you in the right direction.
Thank you. That was a lot. I do want to go back, the one pager for FFC. I do believe that we're going to do that again. I think that was
For the joint meeting?
Yes,
Yeah,
I
we
think that
said
was-
we would get that for the joint meeting as opposed to after the joint meeting to try to be proactive and stop the barrage of questions that we got last year.
How does everyone feel about a letter being sent? I mean, what was the thought process on this letter of?
Sophia, you want to say?
Yeah, we had talked about just reaching out just to inform the town council of the ways that they can get the information about the budget. So the budget document itself, possibly posting the Q&A, so that would be in the letter as well. And then again, extending the invitation that they could reach out and talk to Dr. Willett personally with any questions that they might have, just to kind of open up those avenues. That's all. It's going to be a very benign letter.
Yeah, no, that's completely fine. I don't mind. You had mentioned the questions as well being given to them.
Yeah, if we wanted to share our Q&A document with just the questions and the answers provided.
Okay, because I don't have a problem with that. I mean, just yours and mine. I mean, eventually yours is gonna be on there.
Yeah, I'm
I
fine with
submitted
it.
mine.
What's that?
I said I submitted mine.
Yeah. They'll be there.
Oh, I
You
didn't
can
scroll,
break it
I
into
didn't
one
scroll
page.
down
No,
far
no,
enough
no,
because I
no,
got the
yeah.
answer.
It must be the filter.
I mean, I don't see any problem and any harm in doing that. I don't know in terms, is there anything, Dr. Willett, you could think of that would be an issue with some, having this?
No, I mean, I think I'll develop the one pager and we'll have this and everybody will have plethora of information. Just, what you're putting into the board's, the Q&As is, going to be out there. So whereas if you were going to not spell check, spell check, it's just that kind of thing. So, we'll be doing it a little differently this year and, doing that, pushing it out. So.
Yeah, because I just think if we could streamline this, I like the ideas of streamlining the process. I know I had looked at our meeting, well, I'm gonna say it was March last year, of how we can make this a better transition in terms of getting the budget for us and getting it to the town council and having our meetings. So as we're kind of reviewing that in the meantime, so, those were a couple of suggestions, but it's a little bit different. And I think that at least it opens up the doors, because we've got to get that budget down first. So, thank you very much for all that. And, okay, so let's move to mental health had met in between.
Yeah, well, we didn't have a full meeting because of MLK Day, but we did have a subcommittee meeting, which Dr. Bill was on. We looked over the substance use and risk and behavior assessment that was done last summer, I believe, in 2021. And that was very interesting. I don't think we've had a full board discussion about it, but I encourage all board members to look at it. It was quite.
It is online too.
Yeah.
It's on the site.
Is it on the
It is.
Google Drive or?
It's actually listed in a couple places and in my, one of my eval years, I posted it too. The doc, but you can get it here. Oops, wrong way. Trying to navigate. This right here is the server. You can click on it. You can see all of the data. Server.
Okay, well, some nice reading for everybody.
And I do have one question. Curriculum didn't meet, but one thing that we are going to be doing is looking at quarterly performance for students. And I was just wanted to put it out to some board members if they'd be interested in having kind of that as an agenda item for a regular meeting or just doing that in curriculum. I just thought it might be something that the board as a whole might want to see at least maybe once or twice a year.
Once that dashboard, and
Yeah.
again, budget is kind of taking all the energy, but there are things,
Yeah.
we have, some February, March, April assessments that I've noted. That dashboard will be there all the time. So you'll just revisit the dashboard in whatever meeting you want to revisit the dashboard in, but I will try to make it like the bulletin.
Yeah.
My goal is that it'll be like the superintendent bulletin. It'll just be something regularly updated and then you can dip into it when you wish.
Yeah.
So it's kind of already there in structure and some data is already there, but I want to update it, the February, March, April stuff.
And I will say, when I talked to the admins, I did tell them each that they will be coming back to our board to give us new presentations, starting with science, because he was the longest one. Before
He
we
was
even got
actually
on
in
board.
person.
Yeah, so I
Actually
think,
in person.
like, let's get
How
him
many
in
more to
here.
go? And I think the instructional rounds, when we can get back to that, they're very, very powerful.
I just think that having them come and have an actual presentation is really
Oh,
important.
yeah, well, that's.
So science is number one. You want to put that,
Science
keep it on your
number
own
one.
computer, get him here. And start there. Okay, so that's good. And you said curriculum did not meet.
Yeah, it's next week.
Next week. Okay, at this time, am I missing anyone?
Everyone's girl, but
Chairperson's report, I had just run off a quick little blurb because I thought it was very interesting with our first, well, let me just go for it. So I said, welcome to our budget season. In my opinion, our first ever board-only discussion with the administrators and staff was a huge success. I wanted to thank all of them, even if it was by the Promethean board, for coming and answering our questions. I couldn't help but stay a bit longer into the public portion to finish my rounds, but I still ended up missing one room. I loved the setup of the separate rooms. I feel like we were able to really dive in and not have the conversations going on like right next to you when you are all crammed in that library room. So I would like to make sure that that continues going on. Through the process of asking questions, we can grasp a better understanding of what the needs are. A responsible budget is the topic of conversation. I'm sure I'm not the only one here that had combined. I had all three of my binders going through and comparing all the data and figuring out what line items stay the same within it. As I have said before, and will say it again, I am vested into keeping our schools strong. These students are our future, and our goal is to ensure that our district can remain competitive. So that's what I just wanted to say about that. We do not have any board action. So public participation. So at this time, we can put this. So any public participation, if you want to raise your hand, please list your name and your address for the record, and you will be given 2 minutes by the timer that Dr. Willett will be pulling up. And we can start once he gets that. Okay, Kate.
Howdy, everybody. Kate Howard Better, 103 Goose Lane. Thanks for your work on the budget, everybody. Couple things. First of all, I want to say that I was a little disappointed to hear that the board had kind of private conversations with the administrators. I love the fact that y'all talk to them, but I think it's unfortunate that the public couldn't hear the conversations that y'all were having with them. Just want to put that out there. With regard to funding computers, as you know, using ERF or whatever, it's high time, in my opinion, that you put the technology in your regular budget and not depend on outside funding sources for it. Little bit of a background on requirements for teachers. You really need to know that in order to maintain your certification in the state of Connecticut, teachers are required to have a master's degree, et cetera. And so they're required to have that. So, when we're talking about, waffling on refunding or funding tuition reimbursement, it's just problematic because you're basically saying you don't want highly capable teachers in your district. So just putting that out there. Also, with COVID, you are going to see a vast increase. You are already seeing a vast increase of special ed referrals, which is going to lead to more IEPs, which is going to lead to more expense. So I think it's very wise for you to, have as much money as possible to pay those services, as you know that they are mandated services. I'd also invite you to expand your notion of what special ed is, because it is a really kind of large umbrella, and it covers a lot of different disabilities. So thank you for your good work. I appreciate the conversation and the connection. And I also ask you as board members to be fighting for our kids, be fighting for the school system. Budget will be the budget. It'll pass. It'll be fine. Thank you.
Is there ready? Do you have another one? Yeah, you gotta scroll up. You're
It's got an opinion. Oh, good.
Dismiss, yes.
Thank
There
you.
you go.
Is that Jen? Thank you.
He was excited. He never gets to use the timer.
That's right.
Use it.
That's right.
Um,
Lucky me.
Is there any other public that would like to speak for 2 minutes? Please raise your hand. If not, I will close out the public participation. We can go into points of information. Any board members would like to say anything at this time?
Have a fantastic night.
Motion to adjourn?
I think we're all set.
I have one thing I'd like
Oh,
to say,
go ahead.
sorry. Again, I wanted to thank everybody who came out for the educator, meeting with the educators. I did like having it in the separate rooms. And I know we had to do that for COVID regulations for safety and security. But I did hear a lot of feedback and I heard what Ms. Howard Benner was saying was it would have been nice to somehow, and I get it because of the restrictions we have, but maybe going forward for future budgets, having it be available via Zoom. I don't know when we're gonna be able to have that many people in
You
a
have
big
to have
room.
one in every single room. I mean, that's even with the library though, you have the table spread out pretty much like similar
Yeah.
like this. And then you'd have two at a table. You can't really.
No, I'm
share,
saying
you
like,
know?
I don't know, we can try to get creative in some way, maybe having the educators on the auditorium stage and ask questions, almost like a panel. I don't know. I'm just saying with the technology
Sure, they'd love
available.
I'm sure they'd love that.
I know, right? No, but I think it would behoove us. Like I was with Jaden that entire time, right? So I heard what Jaden's questions were, and then I stayed for the public and I heard what some of the public were asking, but I would have liked to hear the questions that you all had to ask and what
But
the
I
answers
mean,
were.
even in that library room, that's just.
It's
not-
hard. I know, it never has been
That's,
that.
that's just not.
It wasn't that way before. and
I
it
think
hasn't.
this was, to me personally, I mean, if the public wanted to sit in the room and listen, then that's fine, but we got our one-on-one time, because when we had those library rooms, I never got any of my questions answered because you're sitting in public and then they take the time.
I'm not
and then,
disagreeing with you.
know.
I'm just saying that we have technology available to us via Zoom. And maybe trying to get more creative, having other opportunities for public to get involved, would might be something we want to entertain. That's all.
Yeah. just
I
think
did
that it would
appreciate
be-
the quiet conversation because it was just the 4 or 5 of us in a room. And so it was, but again, I think we can get creative with some of the technology we have available. That's all. I don't know what
Dr. Wilson's like, I had a hard enough time getting into the library.
I loved it. It's my favorite meeting.
I thought it was great, but-
Poor man.
Exactly. It's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot.
You know.
Yeah, it is a lot.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Okay. At this time, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Jaden Register, I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I have Tony saying aye on here, just verbally say aye, so that Lisa has it on. Perfect. So thank you. I will close out this meeting at 9:55.